Good evening and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist, a quiet corner of the internet made for winding down, slowing your thoughts, and maybe learning something new along the way. Whether you're tucked under a blanket, lying back with headphones, or just letting the day fade softly into the background, you've come to the right place for calm curiosity. Tonight's journey drift into the organ that quietly rules them all, the brain. That 3-pound conductor of rhythm and thought, orchestrating every breath, every heartbeat, every flicker of feeling. You don't have to do a thing, it's already keeping time, already keeping you alive. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from. It's always fascinating to see just how far these calm little explorations reach across the world. If you enjoy these peaceful science stories, a gentle tap on the like button and a quiet subscribe really helps this channel grow. And if you're already part of this sleepy community, thank you so much for watching. Just be sure to click the notification bell so you won't miss the next gentle descent into science and stillness. And don't worry, I'll do my best not to make this too interesting. But if you do end up staying awake, at least you'll know it's because your brain's curiosity switch is working perfectly. So settle in, breathe, and as the lights of your own awareness dim just a little, let's begin with a simple question. How does the brain control everything, without ever once asking for your permission? It's strange, isn't it, that the thing doing all the thinking about itself is also the one controlling every muscle, every chemical pulse, and every fragment of your mind. The brain isn't just an organ. It's a universe of quiet coordination, an electrical garden where thought and instinct grow side by side. From the moment you wake, it orchestrates millions of processes, each as delicate as the balancing of ions in a neuron, or as vast as the regulation of your heartbeat. And it does this without any conscious effort on your part. It doesn't request input or pause to double-check instructions. The brain has been perfecting the art of control for hundreds of millions of years, long before it ever wondered what control even meant. At its core lies an elegant structure, a system of systems, each region designed to govern something vital. Deep within sits the brainstem, ancient and relentless, watching over breath and pulse. Above it, the cerebellum fine-tunes motion with the precision of a craftsman polishing glass. And further still, the cortex, that rippled shell of awareness, learns, plans, and imagines futures that may never come to pass. Each layer is both servant and master, commanding and obeying in a seamless loop. Yet control doesn't always mean consciousness. The brain prefers delegation. Reflexes guard your body before you can react. Hormones are released to steer mood and metabolism without the faintest whisper of your involvement. Even the sense of you, that inner narrator who feels in charge, is a late arrival in the chain of command, often claiming credit for decisions already made by quieter networks below. Through feedback loops, the brain keeps order in a world of noise. Every sensation, every signal, every thought is part of an endless conversation between what is and what should be. It is a self-correcting masterpiece, forever predicting, adjusting and balancing to maintain its fragile harmony. And as you listen tonight, that same control system is at work, slowing your heart a little, softening your breath, easing your eyelids heavy. The brain isn't just the mind's engine, it's the caretaker of calm. By the end of this journey, you'll have drifted through the circuits that keep you alive, the chemistry that sculpts emotion, and the quiet illusions that make you believe you're steering the ship. But for now, let the question linger gently in your thoughts. If the brain controls everything, who exactly controls the brain? A mug slips from your fingers. There's no time to think, no calculation, no pause to decide what to do next. Your arm shoots forward, your eyes lock on the falling object, your posture adjusts to balance your weight, and your breath catches all in less than the blink of an eye. You didn't plan any of it, yet somehow everything coordinated in a perfect instant of rescue. That's not coincidence. That's command. Inside your skull, the world's most efficient control hierarchy has been running without a break since the moment you first drew breath. It is ancient and layered, precise and improvisational, handling everything from the pace of your heartbeat to the arc of your thoughts. At its base sits the brain stem, the oldest part of the structure, humming with primitive vigilance. It manages breath, pulse, and blood pressure with the steady focus of a lighthouse keeper. Day or night, awake or asleep, it keeps the light turning, steady, calm, automatic. You could say it's the body's unspoken promise. Life continues, even when you forget to pay attention. Above it lies the cerebellum, a dense little hemisphere tucked neatly under the main brain. It's often called the little brain, but it deserves far more credit. It calculates motion like an invisible mathematician, predicting the consequences of every movement and correcting tiny errors before they even happen. Every time you walk without toppling or reach for something without knocking it over, the cerebellum has quietly run thousands of adjustments per second. You never notice because it never complains. It simply prefers precision over applause. Then there are the basal ganglia, the silent gatekeepers of action. They sit deep within the brain, filtering impulses and choosing which ones are worth turning into movement. They are the arbiters of initiative, the difference between a fleeting urge and an actual decision. If the cortex dreams of doing something, the basal ganglia decide whether that dream deserves to become reality. Without them, life would be a storm of impulses. With them, we get rhythm, habit, and control. At the top of this command chain sits the cerebral cortex, that vast, folded landscape of awareness. It's the storyteller, the planner, the strategist, taking raw signals and turning them into language, art, ideas, and self-reflection. But even the mighty cortex depends on its subordinates. The thalamus, positioned like a hub at the brain center, decides which information gets through and which is safely ignored. Every sight, sound, and sensation must pass through this gentle gate before it reaches consciousness. It's a democracy of signals, ruled by priority and purpose. Together these regions form a cascade of control, a hierarchy that balances speed and sophistication. The lower levels act fast, reflexive, and unthinking, while higher levels analyze, evaluate, and plan. When danger strikes, control drops down to the reflex arc. When reflection is needed, command ascends. The system is flexible, handing off authority to whichever level can respond best. The secret behind this harmony lies in feedback. Every signal sent out returns with information about its success or failure. When your brain tells a muscle to move, sensors immediately report back about tension, position, and resistance. It's a conversation that never stops, a loop of action and correction, a perfect duet between command and compliance. You might imagine it as a vast network of lighthouses spread across a coastline, each turning its beam to guide the next. Some sweep fast, handling the immediate waters, others move slowly, marking the horizon. Each depends on the other to keep the whole map illuminated. The beauty of this system is that it wastes nothing. Even when you rest, the brain never truly stops. Electrical ripples sweep across its surface like waves on a midnight sea, ensuring that signals stay synchronized, ready for the next moment of need. This constant readiness is what allows you to sit, breathe, and listen now without any conscious effort. It's the ultimate background process, invisible yet absolute. Control, however, is not about domination. It's about coordination. The brain doesn't rule the body like a tyrant shouting orders. It governs through dialogue. Every organ, every cell, every feedback loop contributes information to the greater pattern. When you run, The muscles send chemical updates. When you eat, your stomach sends hormonal reports. When you rest, your heart and lungs slow down together in quiet agreement. The brain listens as much as it leads. This balance of command and response is what makes you adaptable. It's how you can switch from calm to alert in an instant, or recover balance after a stumble without ever forming a conscious plan. The system learns continuously, updating its internal models from every experience. Each movement, each reaction becomes data for future refinement. You might not remember the mug you caught today, but your neurons do. They'll fire a fraction faster next time, and in that silent exchange, between reflex and reason, between impulse and oversight, lies the essence of control. It is not one voice but a chorus, each part listening, adjusting, and keeping time with the rest. When you feel in control, what you're really sensing is the cooperation of countless microscopic decisions made long before your awareness arrives on the scene. If the brain had a to-do list, it might read, breathe, balance, be brilliant, preferably in that order. It's a short list, but it's been working flawlessly for millions of years. So the next time your hand moves faster than your thoughts, remember, it isn't magic, and it isn't luck. It's the hidden ruler at work, turning chaos into grace one quiet command at a time. When you rise too quickly from bed, there's a brief moment when the world seems to tilt. Your vision narrows, a soft rush fills your ears, and for half a second you feel as though gravity might win this round. But before you can even name the sensation, your body rights itself. Your blood pressure steadies, your balance returns, and life carries on as if nothing happened. What just saved you from fainting wasn't willpower. It was a hidden network of automatic control known as the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic network is the silent conductor of your body's internal orchestra. It governs the rhythms that keep you alive: heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, temperature, and even the tiny adjustments of your pupils in changing light. It operates 24 hours a day, entirely without permission, and has been doing so since long before consciousness evolved. It is divided into two main branches, each with its own distinct personality. The sympathetic system is the accelerator, readying the body for action. The parasympathetic system is the brake, restoring calm and conserving energy. Imagine the sympathetic system as the voice that shouts, "Go!" when the tiger leaps from the shadows. It floods your bloodstream with adrenaline, quickens your heartbeat, dilates your pupils, and shunts blood toward your muscles. Every cell prepares for motion. Then, once the danger passes, the parasympathetic system steps in like a wise friend with a cup of tea, coaxing your heart to slow, your breathing to deepen, and your digestion to resume. Sympathetic mode. Tiger. Parasympathetic mode. T. That's the eternal rhythm of survival and recovery, a dance between readiness and rest. At the heart of this operation lies the medulla oblongata, a structure deep within the brainstem. It acts as a command center for the autonomic network, constantly processing information from sensors scattered throughout your body. Among the most important of these are the baroreceptors, tiny stretch-sensitive cells embedded in the walls of arteries near the heart and neck. Their job is elegantly simple: measure blood pressure in real time. When you lie down, gravity makes circulation easy, blood pools evenly, and pressure remains stable. But when you stand up suddenly, gravity pulls blood toward your legs, momentarily starving the brain of oxygen. The baroreceptors sense this drop in pressure within milliseconds. They send urgent signals to the medulla, which instantly issues corrective commands: constrict the blood vessels in the legs, increase the heart's pumping rate, and raise pressure just enough to push blood back upward. The correction happens so fast you're usually unaware anything occurred at all. This reflex, the baroreflex, is one of nature's finest examples of feedback control, a self-tuning circuit that operates continuously to keep you upright and conscious. Flowing through this system is a nerve with a particularly poetic name, the vagus nerve, from the Latin word for wandering. True to its name, it meanders from the brainstem down through the neck, chest and abdomen, touching nearly every major organ along the way. It carries the parasympathetic signal, the command to slow, rest and digest. When it fires, the heart eases its pace, the lungs relax, and the gut resumes its steady rhythm of movement and secretion. The vagus nerve is in many ways the brain's whispering line of reassurance. You're safe. You can exhale now. There's a fascinating partnership between breathing and heart rhythm known as respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Despite its technical name, it's a sign of healthy flexibility. When you inhale, your heart rate naturally quickens. When you exhale, it slows. This subtle variation is driven by the vagus nerve adjusting its influence with each breath. You can feel this if you pay attention. A tiny pulse of energy on the inhale, a calm wave on the exhale. It's your brainstem fine-tuning the balance between oxygen intake and energy conservation. And here's a quiet secret of physiology that doubles as a tool for peace. By deliberately lengthening your exhalation, you can gently increase the vagus nerve's calming effect. Slow breathing, particularly when the exhale lasts longer than the inhale, enhances parasympathetic tone, lowering heart rate and blood pressure. It's not mystical, it's mechanical. The brain interprets that rhythm as safety, and the entire system shifts toward relaxation. You're literally talking to your nervous system through breath, sending it a message of quiet assurance. This balance between acceleration and rest isn't a competition but a partnership. Without the sympathetic system, you'd never escape danger. Without the parasympathetic, you'd never recover. The two work in constant dialogue, adjusting moment by moment to maintain equilibrium. Even now, as you lie still listening to these words, the autonomic network is delicately tuning your internal world. Tiny fluctuations in heart rate mirror the ebb and flow of your breathing. Vessels expand and contract to balance warmth and oxygen, and the rhythm of your pulse hums steadily beneath it all. What's remarkable is how adaptive this system is. Over time it learns. Athletes, for example, often show stronger parasympathetic recovery after exertion. Their brains have trained the vagus nerve to reassert calm more efficiently. Similarly, chronic stress can tilt the scales in the other direction, keeping the sympathetic system on high alert, like a car engine left idling all night. But the same feedback loops that create imbalance can also restore it. Consistent deep breathing, rest, and gentle movement help retrain the autonomic system toward balance. Every heartbeat you've ever had, over 2 billion of them in an average lifetime, has been managed by this network without fanfare or fatigue. It's one of the quietest miracles of biology, the coordination of countless tiny adjustments, each one measured, tested, and corrected in less time than it takes a thought to form. The next time you rise quickly and feel that faint moment of lightheadedness, you can thank your baroreceptors, your medulla, and your vagus nerve for keeping you conscious. They've caught you mid-fall more times than you'll ever know. It's comforting to remember that long before you learn to walk, think, or even dream, this invisible team of nerves was already working in perfect rhythm. Your brain's heartbeat command, humming faithfully beneath the noise of life. Somewhere inside your head, a single neuron fires. Just one. A brief flicker of electricity, lasting 1,000th of a second. Yet that tiny spark can make a finger twitch, a memory surface, or a thought come to life. That's all it takes. One small pulse, a whisper in a vast electric forest. The brain is not a static organ, but a living storm of signals, each neuron speaking to thousands of others through a language made of voltage and timing. The story of that whisper begins with chemistry. Every neuron maintains an electric charge across its membrane, like a battery waiting to be used. Inside, the cell holds a careful mix of potassium ions. Outside, a sea of sodium ions. The separation between the two creates tension, not emotional tension, but electrical potential. This difference, usually about 70 millivolts, is called the resting potential. It's the quiet before the spark, the calm surface before the ripple. When a neuron receives enough nudges from its neighbours, small chemical messages that say fire, it reaches a tipping point known as the threshold. Once this happens, sodium channels fling open and positively charged ions flood in. The voltage shoots upward, then potassium rushes out to restore balance. The whole event unfolds in a few milliseconds, a pulse of energy called an action potential. It travels down the neuron's long axon like a wave racing along a wire, carrying the message onward. It's not a dramatic explosion or a lightning bolt. It's more like the soft click of a domino in a chain. Neurons don't shout, they nudge, politely but persistently. Each one waits for its turn, responding only when the right number of signals arrive. If the stimulation is too weak, nothing happens. If it's strong enough, the neuron fires completely. There's no halfway. This all-or-nothing rule keeps the brain's communication clean and reliable, a digital system built from biological parts. When the pulse reaches the end of the neuron, it doesn't leap directly to the next one. There's a tiny gap, the synapse, where electrical language becomes chemical. The signal arrives at the terminal and triggers the release of neurotransmitters, small molecules stored in microscopic bubbles. These drift across the gap and bind to receptors on the next cell, opening new channels and allowing ions to flow again. And so the message continues. Neuron to neuron, cell to cell, a silent relay that makes perception, motion and memory possible. Each synapse is a little decision point. Some neurotransmitters excite, urging the next neuron to fire. Others inhibit, encouraging it to stay quiet. This balance between excitation and inhibition is what keeps the brain stable. If everything fired all at once, the result would be chaos, the neural equivalent of everyone in a crowded room yelling at once. Inhibition, far from being a brake on thought, is what makes thought possible. It allows patterns to form, signals to separate, and order to emerge from potential confusion. A healthy brain is not a place of constant action, but of carefully tuned restraint. For every neuron sending a signal forward, others are standing by, holding the line, ensuring that energy doesn't spread too far. These inhibitory neurons act like the soft padding on a drum. They shape the rhythm, define the beat, and prevent the noise from overwhelming the melody. It's a lesson in balance. Too much silence, and nothing happens. Too much noise and everything burns out. You can picture the process like raindrops tapping against a window. One drop alone makes a soft, fleeting sound, but as more gather, the pattern grows, until one drop tips over the edge and slides down, tracing a path that others soon follow. That's how neurons decide when to fire. Each incoming signal is a drop, a tiny addition to the build-up of charge. Most fade away quietly, but sometimes the rhythm aligns just right, and the neuron releases its spark, sending a ripple through the network. That ripple doesn't stop with one neuron. It spreads through vast chains of connections, weaving through billions of cells. In a human brain, there are about 86 billion neurons, and each can form thousands of connections. The result is an almost infinite web of possible pathways, constantly shifting as you learn, rest, or dream. Each thought you've ever had, Every movement, every fragment of a song stuck in your head, all of it is the product of these electrical dances endlessly recombined and refreshed. But neurons aren't rigid machines, they adapt. When one neuron repeatedly helps another fire, their connection strengthens, a principle known as synaptic plasticity. It's the cellular foundation of learning and memory. The famous phrase from psychologist Donald Hebb puts it simply, "Cells that fire together, wire together." Each time a signal travels a particular route, that route becomes a little easier to travel next time. It's as though the raindrops carve channels in the glass, guiding future drops along familiar paths. This plasticity allows your brain to reshape itself throughout life. The more you practice a skill, the more efficient the underlying network becomes. Musicians, for instance, develop precise timing because the neurons controlling finger movement and auditory feedback grow stronger links. The same process underlies habits, language, and even imagination, the physical rewriting of the brain's electrical map. It's remarkable to think that all of this, perception, emotion, memory, consciousness itself, arises from these microscopic flickers of voltage. Each action potential is just a change in ion concentration, a dance of charged particles across a membrane only nanometers thick. Yet together, they create a symphony of control so complex it can contemplate its own existence. At any moment, millions of neurons are firing and falling silent in intricate synchrony. Patterns ripple through your cortex like waves on a calm sea, some representing the sound of these words, others controlling the slow rhythm of your breath. The brain's electricity is never random, it's shaped, constrained, purposeful. Even in rest, it hums with gentle coordination, the signature of a system that never sleeps. So the next time you lift your hand or recall a face from years ago, remember that it all begins with a whisper, a tiny electrical impulse born from the simplest of ingredients. The body electric hums softly within you, its conversation carried out in sparks and silences, polite nudges that add up to something extraordinary. And though each neuron may speak only in faint whispers, together they create the loudest truth in biology. Life itself is a current that never stops flowing. A light tap below the kneecap, the leg jerks forward before you even realize what's happened. No thinking, no planning, no choice. Just pure biology at work. That tiny motion, humble and automatic, is the nervous system's signature move. Fast, efficient, and gloriously indifferent to your opinion. Reflexes are the body's shortcut to survival. They operate on tight loops of wiring, each one designed to handle danger or imbalance before conscious thought can catch up. The circuit is almost absurdly simple. A sensory neuron detects something, a stretch, a touch, a burn, and fires a signal into the spinal cord. There, it connects directly to a motor neuron that sends an immediate command back to the muscle. In less than 1/10 of a second, the response is complete. No committee meetings, no brain approval, just instant action. That simplicity is power. Imagine touching a hot stove. Before you can even form the word hot, the withdrawal reflex has already yanked your hand away. By the time your brain becomes aware of the pain, the damage has been minimized. Reflexes evolve for moments like this, when survival depends on speed, not strategy. They are the nervous system's fire drills, rehearsed and perfected over millions of years. Not all reflexes live in the spinal cord. The brainstem handles its own set of critical duties: the blink reflex that shields your eyes from dust and sudden movement, the gag reflex that prevents choking, the vestibular reflexes that keep you upright when balance wavers. These controls sit closer to the body's vital functions: vision, breathing, equilibrium, and they never wait for permission to act. The logic is simple. By the time you've thought about blinking, it's already too late. Even so, higher regions of the brain still hold influence. The cortex and cerebellum can fine-tune reflex sensitivity, adjusting, strengthening, or softening responses depending on circumstance. Soldiers and surgeons train to suppress their startle reflexes. Athletes refine theirs until reaction and intention blur. This modulation doesn't remove reflexes but reshapes them, teaching the system to respond with precision instead of panic. Scientists call it changing the reflex gain, which is a polite way of saying your brain learns when to flinch and when to stay cool. This delicate balance between speed and control is one of evolution's clever compromises. Reflexes favour immediacy. Deliberate thought favours accuracy. Too much speed and you risk overreacting. Too much reflection and you risk not reacting at all. The nervous system's architecture solves this dilemma by delegating authority. The spinal cord handles immediate responses, while the brain reviews the aftermath. You could say the reflexes act first and file their paperwork later. The analogy isn't far off. Reflexes are like automatic sprinklers in a building. When the heat rises, they don't wait for a manager to confirm there's a fire. They simply release the water. Later, inspectors arrive to see what triggered the alarm and how to prevent a repeat. Likewise, when your hand meets something sharp or your balance falters, reflexes handle the emergency. Then the brain reviews the event, adjusting future responses. It's an elegant system that keeps you safe without drowning you in decision-making. What's fascinating is that even these simple circuits can adapt. A child's exaggerated reflexes gradually settle with growth as the brain learns to regulate them. Repeated training can sharpen reflex timing, as seen in musicians who move in perfect sync or martial artists who react faster than the eye can follow. With every repetition, new feedback strengthens or dampens connections, subtly rewriting the body's code. Reflexes also remind us that intelligence isn't limited to thought. Beneath the surface of awareness, a vast web of local logic runs the body's minute-by-minute adjustments. Each tendon stretch, each blink, each flicker of balance correction is an act of quiet competence. You remain blissfully unaware of most of it, and that's the point. Consciousness doesn't need to be involved in everything. It's far more efficient to let the lower circuits handle maintenance while the upper brain contemplates art, language, or lunch. Of course, instant reactions have their quirks. Reflexes sometimes overdo it. A sudden loud noise can send a jolt through your whole body, even when you know it's harmless. The circuitry doesn't stop to analyse context. It acts on the principle that false alarms are better than fatal delays. The reflex machine errs on the side of caution because it's built from millions of years of emergencies. There's something quietly reassuring about that. These ancient circuits have been protecting living organisms since before the first humans ever walked upright. They are the descendants of the earliest nervous systems, primal loops of sensation and motion that kept creatures alive long enough to evolve awareness. Every quick step you take to regain balance, every blink that shields your eyes, every instinctive pull from danger carries that ancient lineage. Reflexes don't wait for you to think. They don't seek approval or applause. They just work, endlessly, flawlessly, selflessly. They're proof that some of the best decisions in life happen without any thinking at all. Try walking along the edge of a curb, not running, not balancing with outstretched arms, just placing one foot carefully in front of the other. You'll notice a quiet choreography unfolding. Tiny muscles in your ankles make invisible corrections. Your eyes flicker from pavement to horizon, and every step lands with just enough pressure to keep you upright. You don't consciously direct any of it, yet somehow it all happens with the precision of a dancer rehearsing a routine for the 1,000th time. The reason you don't tumble into the gutter is a small but remarkable region of the brain called the cerebellum, Latin for little brain. Tucked neatly beneath the main cerebral hemispheres, the cerebellum accounts for only about 10% of the brain's volume, but contains more than half of its neurons. It is dense, folded, and tirelessly busy. While the cortex handles strategy and intention, the big picture thinking, the cerebellum handles execution. It ensures that movement, timing, and coordination line up so seamlessly that you rarely notice the effort involved. Without it, even a simple task like pouring a glass of water would feel like trying to thread a needle in an earthquake. What makes the cerebellum special is its obsession with prediction. It doesn't just react to what's happening, it forecasts what will happen next. Scientists call this ability a forward model. Every time you move, your brain sends motor commands to your muscles, but a copy of those commands is also sent to the cerebellum. There, the little brain runs a simulation, predicting the sensory consequences of your actions, how much your arm will move, how the liquid in the glass will shift, how the muscles in your fingers will adjust to the weight. If the incoming sensory feedback doesn't match the prediction, the cerebellum immediately corrects the motion. You could say it's allergic to typos in movement. That predictive power is what allows you to act smoothly in a world full of delays. Signals from your eyes, ears, and muscles take milliseconds to reach your brain. A small lag, but long enough that if you waited for feedback before adjusting, you'd always be slightly behind. The cerebellum solves this by running its own real-time forecast, staying one step ahead of sensory reality. It's like a skilled conductor anticipating the next note before the orchestra plays it, ensuring harmony even when the tempo changes. This is why your hand steadies when you reach for something delicate, or why you can catch a falling object without smacking yourself in the face. Every subtle correction, each micro adjustment of angle, tension, and speed is guided by the cerebellum's continuous stream of predictions and corrections. When you walk on uneven ground, it compares what you expected to feel underfoot with what actually happens, then adjusts balance accordingly. It's the ultimate quality control department, reviewing and revising your motor performance several hundred times per second. Like any good editor, the cerebellum improves with practice. The more you repeat a movement, the more accurate its predictions become. This is why learning to ride a bike, play an instrument, or juggle feels clumsy at first. Early attempts flood the cerebellum with prediction errors. Each wobble or missed note becomes data for recalibration. Slowly, through repetition, the forward models tighten their accuracy until the motion feels effortless. The learning is so deep it eventually becomes automatic. Once mastered, you can perform the skill without conscious thought. Even mistakes are valuable to the cerebellum. They serve as calibration points, letting it fine-tune its expectations. Think of it like adjusting a thermostat. If the room is too cold, turn up the heat a little. If it overshoots, turn it down again. Over time, the adjustments grow so subtle they disappear from awareness. That's how a pianist strikes the same keys thousands of times without missing, or how a pitcher throws curveballs with uncanny consistency. Each repetition polishes the brain's internal models until they border on perfection. The cerebellum's precision extends beyond movement. It also contributes to timing, rhythm, and even aspects of thought. Experiments show that people with cerebellar damage often struggle not only with coordination, but also with judging intervals of time or maintaining smooth patterns of speech. It seems that once evolution discovered this reliable timing engine for motion, it began using it for everything else that required prediction, from language pacing to emotional regulation. Even subtle social timing, like knowing when to nod during a conversation, appears to borrow the cerebellum's sense of rhythm. One of the most fascinating qualities of this small structure is how quietly it works. It doesn't clamour for attention or flood the mind with signals. It simply polishes every act, smoothing rough edges, softening hesitations, and giving motion its graceful fluidity. When you reach for a cup, the the cortex decides to act, but the cerebellum ensures your fingers close around the handle without clattering the china. It's the unsung hero of elegance, proof that perfection often lives in the background. Even when you're perfectly still, the cerebellum is running its calculations. Maintaining balance requires continuous adjustment, the sway of your posture, the shifting of weight from one foot to the other, the fine tension of back muscles keeping you upright. Stillness, in a biological sense, is never truly still. It's a dance of micro-movements, orchestrated moment by the cerebellum's vigilant control. It's also a forgiving teacher. If you stumble or miss a step, it doesn't scold or stop. It learns instantly, updating its models and readying for the next attempt. Its memory for movement isn't about words or images, but about patterns of correction, a form of memory written in timing and tension. And once learned, those corrections last for years. You might not ride a bicycle for a decade, but when you do, the cerebellum remembers exactly how to balance. Perhaps that's what makes it so quietly remarkable. The cerebellum doesn't just help you move, it helps you move well. It gives motion grace, thought rhythm, and action reliability. It's the part of you that insists practice makes perfect, not because it enjoys repetition, but because repetition is the key to better predictions. The more accurate its internal forecast, the smoother life feels. The next time you pour water without spilling a drop, or glide across a narrow curb without falling, you're witnessing this little brain's mastery in action. It has already calculated every sway and shift, refined every correction, and kept you balanced long before you had the chance to appreciate it. The cerebellum doesn't need thanks. It just keeps editing, endlessly refining the story of motion until it reads flawlessly, one graceful step at a time. There's a faint clock ticking somewhere in the room. You hadn't noticed it until now, a steady rhythm, delicate and patient. Around it, the hum of the world continues. Distant cars, the soft rush of air, maybe even a faint vibration from a passing train. Yet somehow, once your attention locks onto that tiny sound, everything else recedes. The city fades, the room narrows, and the only thing that seems to exist is the tick. This effortless narrowing of focus is one of the most astonishing feats of the human brain, and it begins in a small egg-shaped structure deep at its center, the thalamus. The thalamus is the great gatekeeper of sensation, the first stop for almost every piece of sensory information entering the brain. Signals from your eyes, ears, skin, and internal organs all arrive there first, waiting to be sorted and sent onward to their respective cortical regions. Think of it as the grand central station of consciousness, where millions of incoming messages line up each second, hoping for permission to pass. But only a few make it through at any given moment. Most are held in quiet suspension, stored just long enough to be ignored. This selectivity isn't carelessness, it's necessity. The brain is bombarded with far more information than it can process in real time. If it tried to register every heartbeat, every flicker of light, every whisper of air, awareness would drown in noise. The thalamus prevents that by filtering, prioritizing, and forwarding only what seems important. It doesn't decide what's true, it decides what's relevant. It's often said that attention is the brain's most valuable currency. Every moment you have a finite budget of awareness, and the thalamus helps you spend it wisely. The structure works closely with cortical networks, particularly in the frontal and parietal lobes, to determine what deserves focus. These regions weigh the sensory data, emotional significance, and goals of the moment to create a constantly shifting map of priority. A sudden movement in your peripheral vision might override everything else, while a loved one's voice can cut through the loudest crowd. This process is sometimes called salience detection, the art of noticing what matters. The brain isn't a camera faithfully recording reality. It's more like a spotlight operator on a dark stage. Wherever attention turns, detail floods in. Everything else drifts into shadow. The thalamus directs that spotlight, opening certain channels wide while dimming others to a whisper. The beauty of this mechanism lies in its restraint. Attention, at its core, is controlled ignorance. It's not about absorbing more, but about discarding most. By choosing what to ignore, the brain finds clarity. The thalamus, in this sense, is less like a loud announcer, and more like a polite doorman, the kind who decides which guests may enter a quiet lounge and which should wait outside. It maintains calm order with perfect manners, allowing the mind to stay focused without being overwhelmed. This filtering extends beyond the senses into the rhythm of consciousness itself. During wakefulness, the thalamus maintains a steady relay of sensory traffic to the cortex, keeping perception sharp and dynamic. But as you drift towards sleep, its gates begin to close. The relay slows, the flow of external information fades, and the cortex starts to decouple from the world. In deep sleep, the thalamus effectively shuts its doors, allowing almost no sensory messages through. Even loud sounds might register as distant echoes, too faint to disturb the inward quiet. Dreaming adds another twist. In rapid eye movement sleep, the thalamus resumes part of its relay function, but instead of forwarding signals from the outside world, it helps channel imagery and emotion generated within. You could say it switches allegiance, turning its attention from the external to the internal. This is why dreams can feel vivid and immersive, yet completely detached from your surroundings. The gatekeeper hasn't stopped working, it's just hosting a different guest list. When attention sharpens again upon waking, the thalamus reopens its gates with exquisite precision. Sensations flood back in, the faint coolness of air, the brightness of light through your eyelids, the sound of morning. It's almost theatrical, the way consciousness restarts, as though someone has quietly lifted the curtain. Despite its quiet role, the thalamus is deeply intertwined with the flow of awareness. Studies have shown that damage to this region can lead to disorders of consciousness, such as coma or profound attention deficits. Without its filtering and relay, the cortex becomes either flooded with noise or starved of meaningful input. Both extremes are equally devastating. It reminds us how fragile focus really is, how much depends on this small, unassuming structure doing its job flawlessly every second of our lives. The thalamus doesn't work alone, of course. It's part of a vast conversation between sensory regions and higher-order control centers, but its contribution is unique. It regulates rhythm. Neurons within the thalamus can fire in precise patterns, synchronizing activity across distant parts of the brain. This synchronization helps define what we perceive as a coherent moment, the difference between scattered impressions and unified experience. It's as if the thalamus conducts the timing of awareness, ensuring that the right notes arrive in harmony. Even subtle shifts in this rhythm can change perception. A sudden distraction, fatigue, or emotional surge can all alter thalamic filtering, letting in more or less of the world. Under stress, the filter tightens, narrowing focus to the threat at hand. In states of calm, it relaxes, allowing the gentle background hum of existence to wash over you. That's why relaxation often brings a wider sense of perception. You start noticing small details, like the texture of fabric or the faint sound of your own breathing. The gatekeeper knows when to stand aside and let the quiet in. If you sit still and listen again to that ticking clock, you might feel the thalamus at work. Every sound around you competes for entry. The passing cars, the sigh of air, the pulse in your ears. But one by one, they fade into the periphery until only the chosen signal remains. This isn't a trick of willpower. It's a delicate choreography between neural relay and cortical attention. You're both the listener and the filter, the one hearing and the one deciding what is heard. There's a certain serenity in knowing that attention itself is a form of craftsmanship, not the frantic grasping of the mind, but the gentle art of letting go. The thalamus makes that possible, holding the door just open enough for meaning to pass through. Like a courteous guardian of consciousness, it decides which sensations are allowed into the quiet hall of awareness and which must wait patiently outside. And in that careful discernment lies the secret to focus, calm, and the gentle order of perception that carries you through every waking moment. Picture yourself sitting at a piano. Your eyes follow the sheet music. Your fingers glide across the keys, and each note flows into the next as if your hands already know the melody. The truth is, they do. Somewhere inside your head, a detailed map of your body is guiding every movement. Not a flat, drawn on paper kind of map, but a living topography that represents every inch of your skin and every muscle you can move. The brain doesn't just control the body, it contains it. Stretching across the surface of your cerebral cortex are two narrow strips, one for sensing, one for acting. The first, just behind the central groove, is the somatosensory cortex, which receives input from touch, temperature, and body position. The second, just in front of that groove, is the motor cortex, which sends out commands to move. Each strip is organized like a map of the human form, but with a twist. It's not drawn to scale. Instead, each part of the body is sized according to how much sensory or motor control it needs. If you could see this brain map made flesh, you'd meet a strange little creature known as the homunculus, Latin for little man. He's a distorted caricature of the human body, with enormous hands, huge lips, and a comically tiny torso. The reason for the exaggeration is simple. Your fingers and mouth have far more nerve endings and finer control than, say, your back or legs. The brain devotes extra space to the areas that require precision and sensitivity. The lips and hands are the VIPs on the cortical guest list, taking up prime real estate while the elbows and knees make do with the suburbs. This unequal distribution explains why a pianist's fingers can dance through complex patterns while their shoulders remain relatively still, or why a light touch on your lips feels magnified compared to the same pressure on your arm. The sensory map is not about fairness, it's about usefulness. It gives priority to the parts of you that interact most delicately with the world. But these maps aren't fixed, they can change, a property known as use-dependent plasticity. The more you use a particular body part in a skilled way, the more cortical territory it claims. Violinists, for example, show enlarged representations of the fingers on their left hand, the one responsible for pressing strings with exact precision. Braille readers have expanded sensory maps for their fingertips, reflecting years of tactile practice. The brain is remarkably democratic when it comes to land ownership. Neurons that work harder get to rent more space. This ability to reshape the map is part of what makes learning physical skills possible. When you first start typing or playing an instrument, the movements feel clumsy because your neural connections are still general and unrefined. With repetition, the brain sharpens its map, improving the timing and coordination between neighbouring areas. Eventually, the skill becomes fluid. The map reorganizes itself until the actions seem to happen effortlessly. What once required thought becomes instinct. These maps even persist when the body itself changes. One of the most intriguing discoveries in neuroscience came from studying people who had lost a limb. Many of them reported sensations, sometimes vivid ones, coming from the missing arm or leg. Touching their face, for instance, might make them feel as though their absent hand were being stroked. It seemed impossible, yet brain imaging confirmed what was happening. The area of the sensory cortex once devoted to the missing limb had been taken over by neighbouring regions, but the old map still lingered. The neurons that once received signals from the hand were now responding to input from the face. but their interpretation hadn't updated. The map was intact, even without the territory. This phenomenon, known as the phantom limb, shows that the body's representation in the brain is not simply a reflection of the flesh. It's an active model maintained by experience. The brain builds its sense of self from the constant conversation between sensation and expectation. When that conversation goes quiet, the brain doesn't erase the missing part. It holds the space open just in case. It's a strangely poetic kind of loyalty. The same principle explains why tools can feel like extensions of your body. A tennis player's racket or a driver's steering wheel quickly becomes part of the brain's operational space. After only a short time, neurons that once represented the hand alone now include the tool in their calculations of reach and feedback. The map expands, seamlessly integrating the artificial with the biological. To your brain, the line between self and object is remarkably flexible. These cortical maps also influence how you perceive your own shape. Close your eyes and touch your nose. You can do it effortlessly because the brain always knows where every part of you is in space. That internal sense, called proprioception, relies on constant input from joints, muscles, and skin, all processed and referenced against the somatosensory map. If that map becomes distorted, as can happen with certain neurological conditions, the body can feel foreign or stretched, as though its boundaries have been redrawn. In a sense, your experience of being you depends on the accuracy of this invisible cartography. There's an artistry to how the brain balances these maps for sensing and acting. The somatosensory cortex receives information about touch, pressure, and position, while the motor cortex uses a mirrored layout to issue commands. Together they create a continuous loop: feel, move, adjust, repeat. Every movement is both guided by sensation and shaped by it. When you run your fingertips across a surface, the sensory map measures the texture while the motor map adapts the motion to what you find. It's like a conversation between two halves of the same mind, one speaking in action and the other replying in touch. Even the act of rest reveals the map's quiet activity. As you sit still, the brain remains aware of posture and balance, maintaining a subtle awareness of where each limb is without needing to look. The map is always online, humming gently in the background. It's not merely a representation, it's the blueprint that keeps the body and brain in constant alignment. To imagine this network visually, picture two mirrored figures glowing faintly across the surface of the brain, one feeling, one moving, their proportions stretched and warped, according to their importance. The lips and fingers shimmer large and bright, the arms taper smoothly, the feet are small but steady at the edge. Together they form a strange but beautiful image of human experience, one that exists entirely within the folds of grey matter. The brain's map of the body is both meticulous and merciful. It learns, adapts, and holds on to memories of touch, long after the touch itself has faded. It allows you to reach, grasp, play, and feel with effortless grace. And though it may exaggerate the hands and lips, it does so out of affection for the tools that connect you to the world. Every note you play, every keystroke, every gentle brush of fabric against skin is a reminder that your brain carries within it a living portrait of your body, one that evolves with every movement you make. You decide to stand up, a simple thought, barely more than an impulse, and yet an entire sequence of events unfolds beneath it. Muscles tighten in the legs, posture shifts, balance recalibrates, and your eyes lift to meet the new horizon. You don't consciously manage any of these details. The act feels seamless, almost automatic. But deep inside your brain, a cluster of structures known as the basal ganglia has just coordinated 1,000 micro-decisions to make it happen. The basal ganglia are the brain's action selectors, quietly determining what you do next. They sit at the crossroads between intention and motion, choosing which potential actions to start, which to hold back, and which to ignore entirely. Without them, thought would never turn into behaviour. Every plan, every movement, every word spoken passes through their gates before being sent out to the muscles. You can think of this system as a kind of train station, a place where countless routes converge, but only certain trains are cleared for departure. Each platform represents a possible action: standing, speaking, reaching for a drink, or remaining still. Signals flash constantly from all directions, but only a few get the green light. The basal ganglia manage the schedule, ensuring that one train leaves smoothly before another tries to pull out. This is accomplished through two main pathways: the direct and indirect routes. The direct pathway acts as the go signal. When it's active, it disinhibits motor circuits, allowing an action to proceed. The indirect pathway, on the other hand, serves as the hold signal, suppressing competing actions. Together they maintain a delicate balance between motion and restraint, a constant negotiation between impulse and inhibition. It's not about chaos or command, but choreography. Each movement you make is the result of this silent conversation. Start, stop, start again. If you've ever hesitated before stepping onto an escalator or paused just before saying something impulsive, you've felt these pathways at work. The brain constantly tests possibilities, weighing timing and context. The basal ganglia don't just pick a single action, they also decide when to let it unfold. And once an action is chosen, they suppress alternatives, keeping your movements fluid and purposeful, instead of scattered. At the heart of this coordination lies a remarkable molecule, dopamine. Though often mislabeled as the pleasure chemical, dopamine is better understood as a teaching signal, the brain's way of saying, "This was worth doing." When an action leads to a rewarding outcome, dopamine levels rise, strengthening the neural connections that produce that behaviour. The next time you face a similar situation, the basal ganglia are more likely to approve that same route. If the result was disappointing, dopamine falls and the pathway weakens. Over time, this feedback loop sculpts your habits, carving efficient grooves into the landscape of your brain. This process is the reason why learning to walk, ride a bike, or type on a keyboard starts awkwardly, but soon becomes automatic. Early on, the cortex is heavily involved, consciously guiding each movement. But as the basal ganglia refine the circuits through repetition and feedback, the task transitions into a habit. You no longer think about how to pedal or which key to press. The train schedule has been optimized. Actions that once required effort now glide through without delay. Even more interesting is how the basal ganglia handle conflicting goals. Imagine you're sitting comfortably, but remember you left your phone across the room. One part of your brain signals the urge to move, another insists on staying put. The basal ganglia weigh the competing inputs, effort versus reward, and determine which wins. If curiosity or importance tips the balance, you'll stand up. If comfort outweighs motivation, you'll stay seated. It's the same process at play when you decide whether to exercise, check a notification, or ignore it. The system measures value, not morality. This ability to evaluate outcomes makes the basal ganglia vital to learning and decision-making. They don't just control movement, they control patterns of behaviour. The circuits that loop through them also link to emotional and cognitive regions, blending motivation with action. That's why habits can feel so hard to break. They're not stored in a single place but woven into the control loops that define what happens next. Habits, for better or worse, are the brain's way of saving energy. Once a behaviour is learned and reliably produces a result, the basal ganglia automate it, freeing the cortex to focus on more complex matters. It's neural efficiency at its best, and sometimes it's most stubborn. When you reach for your phone without realising it, or automatically lock the door as you leave home. It's this system running its routines. The same circuits that make you a master pianist can also make you a chronic procrastinator. The difference lies in what you've taught the brain to value. In Parkinson's disease, where dopamine-producing neurons begin to die, this delicate scheduling system starts to falter. Movements slow, hesitation increases, and the once smooth transitions between rest and action become effortful. It's as though the train station has lost its signal system. Trains line up, unsure when to go. On the other end of the spectrum, conditions that involve excessive dopamine activity can lead to impulsive or repetitive behaviors, where the green lights flash too freely. The brain's ability to decide when to act is every bit as important as the ability to act at all. Beyond movement, the basal ganglia influence timing, rhythm, and even creativity. The same predictive circuits that schedule physical actions also help organize sequences of thought. When you compose a sentence or plan your day, these structures are subtly arranging the order of operations, guiding transitions between ideas much as they do between steps in a walk. They are quite literally the managers of flow, making sure the brain doesn't try to do everything at once. In the end, what emerges from this network is grace through structure. The basal ganglia let you move through the world without overthinking every gesture, yet they also allow deliberate change when you need it. They are the bridge between instinct and intention, mediating the endless conversation between desire and discipline. Standing up, walking, typing, or simply reaching for a glass, all of these unfold as if by magic, but the choreography is ancient and precise. Deep in the shadows of your brain, the train station hums with quiet order. Gates open and close, signals flicker green, and one by one, the right actions depart on time. You're standing on a moving bus, one hand gripping a pole, the other reaching for your drink. The vehicle sways, the floor shifts beneath your feet, and yet your arm moves smoothly, your balance adjusts, and the glass meets your hand without spilling a drop. To the outside observer, it looks effortless. Inside, however, your brain has just executed one of its most complex symphonies, the transformation of intention into motion. It all begins with a spark of decision somewhere in the premotor cortex. This is where the brain plans movement, not the act itself, but the blueprint for it. Before your muscles even twitch, the premotor areas predict what needs to happen, how far to reach, which direction to lean, how much strength to use. They also consider context, the moving bus, the slosh of liquid, the need to stay upright. Every subtle factor gets built into the plan before a single signal is sent. Once the plan is ready, it passes to the primary motor cortex, often called M1, the final command center perched like a ridge along the top of your brain. Here, neurons representing different parts of your body burst into precise patterns of activity. The command to move your arm doesn't emerge as a single order, but as a cascade. Each muscle group instructed when to contract, how much force to apply, and how to coordinate with its neighbors. It's less like pushing a button and more like conducting an orchestra, each instrument entering at the perfect moment to create a seamless movement. From there, the electrical message travels downward through the corticospinal tract, a dense cable of nerve fibers running from the cortex through the brainstem and into the spinal cord. This tract is the superhighway of voluntary motion, carrying impulses at remarkable speed, up to hundreds of signals per second, to the motor neurons that directly activate your muscles. Each neuron along the way passes the baton with near-perfect timing, ensuring that by the time the signal reaches your arm, every muscle knows exactly what to do. But the brain doesn't rely solely on this one pathway. Supporting it is a network of extrapyramidal systems, secondary routes through the brainstem that handle posture, balance, and coordination. These circuits make sure you don't topple over while performing your main task. As your arm reaches out, other signals ripple through the reticular formation and vestibular nuclei, subtly adjusting the tone of your back and leg muscles to counterbalance the shift in weight. It's a constant conversation between intention and stability, every action paired with an equal and opposite correction. The cerebellum joins the dialogue too, watching from its seat beneath the cortex like a tireless editor. It compares what you meant to do with what's actually happening, sending instant corrections back through the motor system. When the bus lurches, it's the cerebellum that senses the mismatch between expected and real motion and quickly adjusts your posture to keep the glass steady. It's predictive, precise, and endlessly patient. Never demanding credit, only perfection. The brainstem also plays its part, serving as the bridge between higher command and spinal execution. Here, motor signals are refined, synchronized, and sometimes overridden if the situation calls for it. Reflex arcs at this level can jump in to make emergency corrections faster than conscious thought. You might notice your grip tighten instinctively when the bus jolts. That's the lower circuits taking initiative, keeping the plan intact while the upper brain recalculates. The beauty of this system lies in its redundancy. The brain doesn't trust any single path to handle movement alone. If one route fails, others can step in. This design, known as graceful degradation, allows for partial function even after injury. Someone who suffers damage to part of the motor cortex, for example, can often regain movement through rehabilitation because alternate circuits learn to compensate. It's as though the orchestra can still perform beautifully, even if one section plays a little softer for a while. Each movement, even the smallest, requires exquisite coordination between thousands of neurons spread across multiple regions, and yet it all happens effortlessly in fractions of a second. The cortex initiates, the brainstem stabilizes, the cerebellum refines, and the spinal cord delivers. Like sections of an orchestra passing the melody hand to hand, the tune remains recognizable even as it changes players. The result is the fluid grace of motion, something that feels simple only because the complexity is so well hidden. This hidden hierarchy also explains why movement can feel so intuitive once learned. When you first practice a new skill, say playing an instrument or learning a sport, the cortical regions are heavily engaged, consciously managing every detail. Over time, as the cerebellum and basal ganglia refine the coordination, control shifts to deeper, faster circuits. The result is a movement that seems to execute itself. You think reach or run, and the orchestra already knows the notes. The system isn't just for physical action. It's also the foundation for rhythm, speech, and even thought. The same timing and sequencing that guide your limbs also help structure sentences and coordinate breathing with words. In a sense, movement is the language of the brain. Everything else, from talking to writing, evolved from its capacity to orchestrate action in time. When these pathways are disrupted, their complexity becomes visible. Damage to the corticospinal tract can lead to weakness or loss of precision, while disorders affecting the extrapyramidal system, such as Parkinson's disease, can produce stiffness or tremor. Yet even in these cases, the adaptability of the motor network shines through. The brain learns new strategies, recruits alternative circuits, and finds fresh routes to the same goal. Motion, it seems, is too important to leave vulnerable to a single point of failure. If you could watch all of this unfold inside your own head, from the first hint of intention to the final contraction of muscle fibers, it would look like a carefully choreographed relay race. Signals flash from one region to another, each taking its turn to shape the movement before handing control onward. And at the end of the chain, somewhere far from the brain that began it, a hand closes around a glass, perfectly timed to the sway of the bus. What we call coordination is really conversation. Billions of neurons, each doing its part, maintaining balance and purpose amid constant change. The motor pathways are proof that control is not about rigidity, but about adaptability, not about issuing orders, but about listening and adjusting in real time. They transform will into movement, thought into touch, and hesitation into flow. When the bus finally stops and you step off, your brain doesn't rest. It simply shifts the melody. New muscles take up the theme, new pathways light the way forward. The orchestra never stops playing. It just changes tempo to match the rhythm of your world. The difference between morning and night isn't just sunlight and shadows, it's chemistry. When you wake up, your brain changes its internal lighting. Circuits brighten, signals sharpen, and the mind shifts into a mode built for focus and movement. As the day fades, that same system gradually softens, swapping alert precision for warmth and rest. It's a transformation not governed by switches or sparks, but by waves of molecules drifting through your neural landscape, the neuromodulators. These chemical messengers don't carry individual thoughts the way electrical impulses do. Instead, they set the overall tone of the brain, deciding whether neurons should be excitable, calm, curious, or content. Where a single neuron's spike might whisper, "Move this muscle," neuromodulators act like lighting directors, deciding whether the scene should feel bright and focused or dim and relaxed. In essence, they determine your state of being. Among the most famous of these chemical conductors is dopamine, the molecule of motivation and learning. It doesn't deliver pleasure in itself, but teaches the brain what's worth pursuing. When something surprising and rewarding happens, a solved problem, a delicious bite, a piece of good news, dopamine surges through specific pathways, marking that moment as significant. It's the brain's way of saying, "Remember this." Do it again over time. Dopamine fine-tunes behavior, linking effort to reward, teaching you what's worth your energy and what isn't. In the early morning, dopamine levels rise, encouraging alertness and action. It fuels curiosity and goal-directed behavior, the mental push that gets you out of bed and moving toward breakfast, work, or whatever your brain decides is worth chasing that day. But dopamine's power is a double-edged sword. When its balance falters, motivation can wither, or, in excess, obsession can take root. The same signal that drives achievement can also feed addiction. The brain, it turns out, is very good at rewarding itself, even when the rewards aren't good for it. Alongside dopamine flows serotonin, the quiet counterpart that stabilizes mood and perspective. If dopamine drives pursuit, serotonin ensures patience. It's most active when the brain is satisfied, maintaining a steady sense of well-being rather than the rush of desire. High serotonin levels bring calm, contentment, and emotional balance. That gentle, "it's okay" feeling after a long day. It's the chemical reason a walk, a meal, or a moment of stillness can feel restorative. Too little serotonin and the world can appear dim and restless. Too much, and motivation fades into complacency. Like all good chemistry, its strength lies in moderation. Then there's norepinephrine, the brain's internal wake-up call. Released mainly from the locus coeruleus, a small but mighty cluster of neurons in the brainstem, it acts as a high-voltage signal for attention and readiness. When something unexpected happens, norepinephrine surges, increasing alertness and sharpening focus. It's the reason you instantly wake when you hear your name called, or why your mind clears in a flash when a car horn blares too close. This system keeps you vigilant, filtering out noise and spotlighting what matters most in the moment. But constant activation, as in stress, leaves the system exhausted. The same chemical that fuels attention can, when overworked, drive anxiety. Balancing all of this is acetylcholine, the brain's precision specialist. While norepinephrine tells you to pay attention, acetylcholine decides where that attention should go. It fine-tunes focus, helping you study, listen, or notice subtle details. It's also vital for memory, the reason you can recall a conversation or learn a new skill. Acetylcholine heightens the brain's ability to form lasting connections, turning experiences into knowledge. If dopamine is the spark that says learn this, acetylcholine is the craftsman who carefully engraves it into the circuitry. Working quietly in the background is histamine, often better known for its role in allergies than in thought. In the brain, though, it serves as another wake promoter. Histamine neurons, located in a region called the hypothalamus, keep you alert and oriented during the day. When they slow down, sleepiness arrives. Antihistamines, the same drugs that calm allergic reactions, block these signals, which is why they make you drowsy. Histamine is the unsung hero of consciousness. Subtle, steady, and easily overlooked until it fades. These chemicals rarely act alone. Instead, they weave together to set the brain's global state, a kind of mood lighting for cognition. In the morning, the combination of dopamine, norepinephrine, and histamine creates clarity and drive. Neurons fire briskly, thoughts align, and energy flows toward doing. By evening, serotonin and acetylcholine begin to dominate, ushering in calm reflection and winding down the day's urgency. It's a beautifully synchronized rhythm, bright for calculus, dim for cozy. The brain's own mood lighting system. What's remarkable is that these global shifts happen seamlessly, even as the brain continues to run countless local operations. A neuron in your visual cortex might be processing light from a window, while another deep in the hippocampus consolidates a memory from breakfast. Neuromodulators wash over both, adjusting how sensitive they are to input, not rewriting their roles, just setting the stage on which they perform. It's chemistry as context, tuning the instrument without changing the song. This system also adapts dynamically to circumstance. In danger, norepinephrine floods the system, sharpening reflexes and narrowing focus to survival. During creative flow, dopamine and acetylcholine rise together, pairing curiosity with concentration. In peaceful moments, serotonin dominates, broadening awareness and encouraging rest. The brain is not locked into one mood or mode. It glides between them, orchestrated by these invisible chemical conductors. Sometimes the coordination falters. Sleep deprivation, stress, or illness can throw these balances off, leaving the brain too wired, too dull, or too scattered. The delicate dance of neuromodulators is what allows us to feel in tune with our environment. When that harmony slips, even simple tasks can feel like wading through fog. Yet, just as easily, a good night's rest or a moment of joy can restore the chemistry of clarity. What makes this system even more extraordinary is that it's self-aware in a way. The same chemicals that modulate perception also influence how we perceive our own state. Dopamine can make challenges feel exciting. Serotonin can make them feel manageable. They shape not only how we act, but how we interpret our actions. Every decision, every emotion, every wave of energy or calm carries their imprint. In a single day, your brain cycles through countless chemical modes, from the first flicker of alertness to the last drift before sleep. And all the while, these molecules hum quietly in the background, setting the tempo for thought and feeling. You don't notice them unless they falter, which is perhaps the highest compliment. They make everything feel natural. When you wake tomorrow, remember that the brightness of your mind isn't just about rest or willpower. It's also about this elegant internal chemistry, balancing focus and peace like a dimmer switch for awareness. The neuromodulators are the architects of mood, attention, and learning, and they never stop working. They colour the daylight of thought and paint the twilight of rest. The brain's own lighting crew, making sure the stage of consciousness is always perfectly set for whatever comes next. You cross a familiar street, and for a moment something feels off. The air feels heavier, your steps slow, and you find yourself glancing around before realizing why. This is the street where something unpleasant once happened. Maybe a near miss with a car, maybe a painful memory. You haven't thought about it in months, but your body remembers. You take a different route without even meaning to. That quiet decision, the shift in behavior shaped by feeling, is the limbic network at work. The limbic system is the emotional command center of the brain. It doesn't think in words or logic. It speaks the language of value, of what matters, what hurts, and what feels safe. Nestled deep within the folds of the brain, it includes several key structures: the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the cingulate cortex, among others. Together, they evaluate experience, store emotional memories, and guide the choices that shape our lives. At the heart of this network is the amygdala, two small almond-shaped clusters of neurons that act as sentinels for emotional relevance. They monitor incoming information for signs of importance, detecting threats, rewards, or anything that might demand a quick reaction. The amygdala doesn't wait for evidence. It's fast, sometimes impulsive, designed to keep you alive first and accurate second. When you flinch at a sudden sound or feel uneasy in a dark alley, that's the amygdala sounding the alarm. Next to it lies the hippocampus, the brain's master archivist. While the amygdala stamps experiences with emotional significance, the hippocampus records the context, the who, where, and when of what happened. Together, they form an inseparable partnership. Emotion gives memories their weight, and memory gives emotions their meaning. That's why you can recall joyful moments with vivid detail or feel your stomach tighten at the smell of a hospital. These structures are constantly cross-referencing one another, building a personal history that quietly influences what you do and avoid. Hovering above them, the cingulate cortex acts as the emotional bridge to decision-making. It connects feelings to actions, translating the body's reactions into conscious awareness. When you experience conflict, torn between wanting to confront someone and wanting to stay polite, the cingulate cortex lights up, mediating between impulse and restraint. It helps you weigh the emotional cost of a choice, sometimes long before reason enters the conversation. This trio of structures gives emotion its steering power. They assign valence, the positive or negative charge of experience, and salience, the degree of importance. Not every stimulus earns attention. The limbic network decides which ones do. A neutral street becomes charged if it's linked to fear. A melody becomes comforting if it's tied to happiness. Over time, these emotional associations shape behavior, teaching the brain what to approach and what to avoid. In essence, emotion is the brain's learning signal. Every decision, whether deliberate or instinctive, carries an emotional tag, a feeling that says, "This was good," or "This was not." The amygdala learns quickly from outcomes, strengthening the pathways that lead to safety and weakening those that don't. It's a shortcut to survival, built on experience rather than analysis. If a street once made you anxious, you won't need to think twice about avoiding it in the future. Emotion does the remembering for you. But emotion isn't always about survival in the primal sense. It's also how the brain prioritizes meaning. Love, curiosity, frustration, pride, all are signals that guide behavior toward what the mind finds valuable. Without emotion, choice would be mechanical, aimless. The limbic system doesn't just protect you, it gives your actions purpose. It ensures that the things you care about stand out in a crowded world of possibilities. Of course, this ancient circuitry needs supervision. Enter the prefrontal cortex, the thoughtful executive perched at the front of the brain. Its job is to regulate and reappraise emotions, not to suppress them, but to keep them proportionate. When you feel anger rising, it's the prefrontal cortex that counsels patience. When fear exaggerates a risk, it reins the reaction back to reality. This partnership between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system is what allows emotional intelligence, the ability to feel deeply but act wisely. Sometimes, though, the partnership falters. Strong emotions can overwhelm rational oversight, flooding the system with energy that bypasses reflection. That's when words are spoken too sharply or actions are taken too fast. In those moments, the amygdala temporarily outruns the prefrontal cortex, a phenomenon neuroscientists call an amygdala hijack. Later, once calm returns, the brain's rational circuits catch up, often with a sigh of regret. It's a reminder that emotion may serve as commander, but not always as diplomat. Still, even the most intense emotions fade with time, thanks in part to reappraisal, the brain's ability to reinterpret an event and in doing so, reshape the feeling it evokes. When you revisit a painful memory and see it from a new perspective, you're not erasing it. You're rewiring the emotional response attached to it. The hippocampus stores the updated context, the amygdala adjusts its threat level, and the prefrontal cortex ensures that next time, you remember the lesson without reliving the distress. You can think of this dynamic system as a kind of internal climate. Feelings are the weather, quick, changeable, sometimes stormy. Mood is the climate, the long-term pattern that gives emotional life its tone. The limbic network generates the weather, while the prefrontal regions help maintain the climate. Together they ensure that emotions move through rather than take over, leaving the sky of the mind clear again once the storm has passed. It's tempting to think of emotion as irrational, but it's more accurate to see it as a deeply efficient form of logic, one that operates faster than words. It's the body's way of making meaning, compressing thousands of variables into a single intuitive signal. The warmth you feel when you see a friend, the tightening in your chest before a risky choice, the satisfaction after solving a problem. These sensations are data, distilled into feeling. The limbic system, then, is less about chaos and more about coherence. It keeps the story of your life emotionally organized, weaving threads of joy, fear, and hope into the tapestry of memory. Without it, experiences would still occur, but they'd have no color, no hierarchy of importance. You'd remember facts, but not why they mattered. So when you change your route to avoid that uneasy street, it's not weakness, it's wisdom encoded in emotion. The limbic network is steering you, quietly and efficiently, using lessons written not in words but in feelings. It's the ancient captain beneath your conscious thought, navigating by memory, mood, and meaning. And when the weather of emotion changes, as it always does, it leaves behind a clearer map. A chart not of roads and landmarks, but of the experiences that make you human. You dust off an old bicycle that hasn't been touched in years. The tyres are low, the seat feels unfamiliar, and for a moment you hesitate, wondering if you still remember how to ride. Then you push off, wobble once, and glide forward. The balance, the timing, the effortless rhythm, it all returns as if no time has passed. You may have forgotten the details, but your body hasn't. This simple act captures one of the brain's greatest feats, the ability to store different kinds of memory in different systems, ready to guide action even when conscious recollection fades. Memory isn't a single library with neatly labelled shelves. It's more like a city with many districts, each specialising in its own kind of knowledge. Some areas hold the stories of your life, where you went, what you saw, who you met. Others store skills and habits, so deeply ingrained they operate without your awareness. These different memory systems work together to make sure the past continually shapes the present, often without asking your permission. Two main regions take the spotlight here: the hippocampus, guardian of declarative memory, and the striatum, home of procedural memory. The hippocampus handles memories you can consciously recall, facts, events, and experiences. It allows you to say, "I remember my first day of school," or "I once visited that cafe." It links context, space, and time into coherent narratives, like a historian keeping an orderly archive. When you recall a story, it's the hippocampus flipping through its records, cross-referencing the details and reassembling the scene. The striatum, on the other hand, cares little for storytelling. It's the workshop of repetition, storing the routines that shape action: walking, tying shoes, playing piano, or riding that bike. These memories aren't easily verbalized. They live in muscle timing and reflexes, refined through trial and feedback. The striatum works closely with the basal ganglia, turning effort into instinct through endless rehearsal. Long-term memory stores the manual, habits run the software. This separation between declarative and procedural memory keeps the brain efficient. You don't need to consciously remember how to balance each time you ride a bike. Your procedural circuits handle the details. Meanwhile, the hippocampus remains free to focus on new information: the scenery, the route, the cafe you're cycling toward. One system keeps you upright, the other keeps you oriented. But memory isn't static. Each time you recall an event or perform a skill, the memory itself becomes flexible again, a process known as reconsolidation. When a memory is reactivated, the brain reopens its file for editing. It can reinforce what's still accurate, discard what's outdated, and add new details. This allows memories to evolve rather than fossilize. You might remember your childhood street as larger than it was, or your favourite teacher's voice differently than it sounded. Each recall reshapes the original, tuning it to fit your present perspective. Reconsolidation is the reason learning never truly stops. Even habits, those most stubborn of neural patterns, are open to refinement. A tennis player adjusting her swing, or a musician perfecting a scale, is not forming a brand new memory, but updating an old one. Each new attempt adds subtle corrections to the network, improving timing, precision, and confidence. The past becomes a living guide, constantly rewritten to serve the present more effectively. Not all memories need to last a lifetime, though. For the brain's daily business, there's working memory, a temporary workspace where ideas are juggled, compared, and tested. It's the mental equivalent of a scratch pad. You hold a phone number long enough to dial it, plan a sentence before you speak, or keep track of the steps in a recipe. The prefrontal cortex plays a starring role here, maintaining and manipulating bits of information just long enough to make decisions. Once the task is complete, the contents are erased to make room for the next challenge. Working memory is limited but endlessly agile, proof that sometimes thinking is simply organized forgetting. These layers of memory don't exist in isolation. They interact constantly, forming a loop between recall, action, and prediction. When you approach a familiar situation, the hippocampus provides context. "I've been here before," while the striatum supplies the practiced response. "I know what to do." If the outcome deviates from expectation, the brain takes note, updating both the story and the skill. Over time, this cycle fine-tunes behavior, creating a seamless blend of conscious decision-making and automatic control. This cooperation also reveals how memory can sometimes mislead. Declarative memory, being flexible, is prone to distortion. You can misremember conversations, exaggerate events, or merge separate experiences into one. Procedural memory, though more stable, can be stubborn. Once a habit forms, it resists change even when you know better. The result is a curious duality. Your brain can remember incorrectly and still act correctly, or remember correctly and still act habitually. It's both the strength and the quirk of a system built for efficiency rather than perfection. Emotions, too, leave their fingerprints on memory. The amygdala works alongside the hippocampus, ensuring that experiences tied to strong feelings are stored more vividly. That's why you can recall where you were during an important life event, but struggle to remember what you had for breakfast yesterday. Emotional intensity acts like a highlighter, emphasizing what the brain should never lose track of. But even emotional memories evolve through reconsolidation. They can soften over time, fade, or be reframed by new understanding. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of memory is how seamlessly it integrates with imagination. The same neural machinery that reconstructs the past is also used to simulate the future. When you plan, predict, or daydream, the hippocampus draws on stored fragments of experience and rearranges them into possible scenarios. In this way, memory doesn't merely preserve the past, it forecasts what comes next. Every choice you make is informed by echoes of what has worked before, and every prediction refines those echoes for the next attempt. It's easy to take this invisible guidance for granted. Every time you reach for a doorknob, navigate a familiar street, or recall a face, you're relying on an internal archive that never sleeps. Even in rest, the hippocampus replays recent experiences, helping consolidate them into long-term memory. The brain is effectively journaling while you dream, turning the day's chaos into ordered recollections ready for future use. Memory is not a static record, but a dynamic advisor, a bridge between what was and what could be. It lets you ride a bicycle after years, speak a language you learned long ago, or avoid a mistake you've already made once. It balances precision and flexibility, preserving enough of the past to inform the present without imprisoning you in it. In the grand design of control, memory is the quiet strategist. It doesn't command your actions directly, it prepares you to act wisely. The hippocampus guards the stories that make you who you are, while the striatum maintains the skills that let you move through the world with grace. Together they ensure that life unfolds not as a series of disconnected moments, but as a continuous narrative, one guided gently but persistently by everything you've ever learned. You're sitting in a cafe, surrounded by the low hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, and the soft grind of a coffee machine. A friend across the table begins to speak, but halfway through a sentence their voice is drowned out by a burst of laughter from a nearby group. Yet you still catch the meaning. Your brain fills in the missing word effortlessly, without hesitation or confusion. It's as if it predicted what came next, because it did. The brain is not a passive receiver of information. It's an active guesser, a continuous forecaster of what the world will be like a split second from now. Rather than waiting for sensory data to arrive, it constantly generates predictions about incoming signals and compares them to reality. When the prediction matches what it senses, the brain saves effort. When it doesn't, it sends up an alert, a signal of surprise, and updates its model. This elegant process, known as predictive coding, keeps perception fast, efficient, and remarkably accurate most of the time. Every moment your senses deliver a flood of raw data, light striking the retina, air vibrating in your ears, pressure shifting across your skin. Processing it all from scratch would be overwhelming. Instead, the brain uses experience to make educated guesses about what's likely to happen next. It assumes continuity, that the world will behave much as it did a moment ago. So when your friend speaks, your brain anticipates the next sounds based on language, context, and tone. It's why you can understand muffled speech, recognize faces in dim light, or read sloppy handwriting. Perception isn't built from zero, it's built from expectation. At the core of this system lies a constant feedback loop: prediction, comparison, and correction. The brain issues predictions, what it expects to see, hear, or feel, and then compares those predictions to incoming sensory data. Any mismatch creates a prediction error, a kind of internal alarm that says, something's not as expected. The brain then uses this error to refine its internal model, reducing future surprises. It's a beautifully efficient strategy. Guess boldly, correct gently, and learn continuously. This process works across every level of the nervous system. The visual cortex predicts patterns of light and shadow before the eyes even move. The auditory system forecasts the rhythm of speech and music, allowing you to follow a tune or anticipate a pause. Even motor control runs on prediction. When you reach for a cup, your brain estimates the weight before touching it, adjusting muscle tension accordingly. Reality becomes a test of how good your predictions are. One researcher once described perception as a controlled hallucination. It's not meant to sound mystical. It's simply a reminder that what you experience isn't raw reality, but a carefully constructed version of it. The brain's internal model paints a picture based on past experiences, then updates it when necessary. Most of the time, the hallucination matches the world perfectly. Occasionally it doesn't, and that's when we notice how much we normally take for granted. You can see predictive coding in action whenever your expectations are violated. A phone buzzes in your pocket that isn't there. You reach for a step that doesn't exist. You mishear a lyric only to realize your brain had already decided what it should have been. These moments reveal the underlying machinery. Your mind constantly simulating the world and occasionally tripping over its own foresight. The balance between prediction and surprise is what keeps perception both stable and flexible. Too much prediction, and you stop noticing new information. Too much sensitivity to error, and the world becomes noisy and confusing. The brain walks a careful line, weighting its expectations according to reliability. If the environment is predictable, it trusts its priors. If it's chaotic, it relies more heavily on sensory input. This dynamic tuning is what allows you to drive smoothly on a familiar road, but instantly refocus when something unexpected crosses your path. In the cafe, this same principle allows you to understand conversation in a noisy setting. Your brain predicts the structure of sentences and the rhythm of speech, filling in missing syllables and words when sound is lost. It's not cheating, it's efficiency. The brain is using the statistical patterns of language learned over a lifetime to minimize effort. In a sense, perception is like an autocomplete for reality, one that makes educated guesses about what's coming next, with frequent spell checks against the world to keep it honest. This predictive nature extends far beyond the senses. It shapes movement, thought, and emotion. When you reach for an object, the motor system predicts the consequences of that action, how far the arm will move, how much resistance to expect. If the feedback matches the prediction, motion feels smooth. If it doesn't, say the object is heavier than expected, the brain rapidly corrects mid-action. Emotion works the same way. If the brain predicts safety and instead encounters threat, the mismatch triggers anxiety. Every experience, from catching a ball to catching a mood, involves the minimization of surprise. Prediction also gives rise to learning. Each time an expectation fails, the brain adjusts its internal models to improve future accuracy. This is how infants learn the rules of gravity, language, and cause and effect, not by memorizing, but by predicting and revising. Dopamine plays a key role here, signaling the difference between expected and actual reward. When the outcome is better than predicted, dopamine rises. When it's worse, it falls. In this way, the chemistry of surprise becomes the engine of adaptation. The predictive brain doesn't merely react to the world, it shapes what the world seems to be. That's why two people can witness the same event and remember it differently. Each starts with a unique set of priors, expectations built from personal history, and filters new information through that lens. The result is subjective but efficient. Reality, as experienced, is always part forecast and part feedback. Even your sense of self depends on this ongoing prediction loop. The brain constantly anticipates the consequences of your own actions, the pressure of footsteps, the sound of your voice, the rhythm of your breathing. When those predictions line up, the world feels stable and owned. When they don't, things feel off, as in the rare moments when you hear an echo of your own words or see your reflection lag in a video call. The self, too, is a construct maintained by expectation and error correction. Of course, prediction isn't infallible. The same machinery that makes perception efficient can also generate illusions. The brain sometimes fills in gaps too eagerly, mistaking assumption for reality. Optical illusions, auditory tricks, and even cognitive biases all arise from this overconfidence. Yet without prediction, perception would collapse under the weight of data. It's better to be occasionally wrong than perpetually uncertain. By the end of the day, your brain has made millions of predictions about sights, sounds, sensations, even emotions. Most of them correct, some wildly off. Each one helps fine-tune your understanding of the world, inching you closer to the elusive goal of perfect anticipation. But perfection isn't really the point. Life's richness comes from the gentle tension between what you expect and what surprises you. The next time you catch someone's meaning in mid-sentence or finish a melody before it's played, take a quiet moment to appreciate what's happening. Your brain isn't just hearing or seeing, it's foreseeing. Every perception is a tiny experiment, every moment a hypothesis tested against reality. You're not simply living in the present, you're living about half a second ahead, guided by predictions so seamless you rarely notice them. And when the world proves you wrong, when surprise sneaks in, that's not failure, it's learning in motion, the mind's most elegant feedback loop. You touch something too hot, a pan handle, a mug fresh from the microwave, and before you can even form the thought, that's burning, your hand has already snapped back. The pain arrives an instant later, sharp and instructive, like punctuation on a sentence your body already wrote. Pain, for all its unpleasantness, is one of the brain's most effective teachers. Its lessons are swift, memorable, and almost impossible to ignore. At its core, pain begins with nociception, the detection of harmful or potentially harmful stimuli. Specialized nerve endings in your skin, muscles, and organs serve as sentinels, constantly watching for extremes of temperature, pressure, or chemical irritation. When they detect danger, they fire signals that race up the spinal cord toward the brain. This information doesn't just scream hurt, it says, this might damage the system. Take action now. But the experience of pain, the part that feels personal, emotional, and vivid, isn't created until those signals reach the brain. There, the somatosensory cortex identifies where the pain is coming from, the insula registers its intensity, and the anterior cingulate cortex adds the emotional weight that makes it matter. It's a collaborative effort. One region locates the fire, another sounds the alarm, and a third ensures you care enough to move your hand away. Pain is not punishment, it's protection. It exists to steer behavior, to shape your future decisions before harm accumulates. In a sense, it's an internal traffic control system, laying out bright orange cones along the dangerous paths of life. Cross them once, and you'll remember where they are forever. The next time your hand hovers near a hot surface, you'll hesitate. Not because you're thinking about physics, but because your brain's learned to associate that situation with discomfort. Pain is the signal that says, not that again. Of course, the brain doesn't rely on pain alone to guide behavior. It balances that system with another: pleasure, delivered through the reward pathways of the brain. Chief among them is the mesolimbic dopamine system, which links the midbrain to areas like the nucleus accumbens and prefrontal cortex. When something feels good, a delicious meal, laughter, a goal achieved, dopamine flows through these circuits, reinforcing the actions that led to the reward. Pleasure says, "Do that again." Pain and pleasure together form the simplest and most universal control mechanism in biology. Every organism, from single-celled amoebas to humans, navigates the world through versions of these two signals. Approach what sustains life, avoid what threatens it. Over millions of years, evolution refined this binary guidance system into a nuanced symphony. Pain doesn't just stop you, it teaches restraint. Pleasure doesn't just reward, it motivates exploration. The brain's mastery lies in how it balances both. Never too much stick, never too much carrot. The fascinating part is that pain isn't purely mechanical. Its intensity can be profoundly shaped by context, expectation, and attention. If you brace for something painful, your anticipation can heighten the sensation. But if your attention is elsewhere, or if you believe the pain will lead to benefit, as in exercise or healing, the brain can turn the dial down. Pain is not an absolute experience, it's an interpretation. This modulation happens through a powerful internal system of endogenous opioids, the body's own painkillers. These chemicals, including endorphins and enkephalins, are released from the brain and spinal cord to dampen incoming pain signals. They bind to receptors that inhibit the transmission of nociceptive messages, effectively turning down the volume. They're why runners speak of a high, or why people in emergencies can act through injury before realizing they're hurt. The brain decides when pain is useful and when it's merely distracting. The placebo effect, often dismissed as illusion, is another window into this control. When someone believes a treatment will help, the brain can release real opioids and dopamine, reducing pain and lifting mood. Belief becomes biology. The same networks that respond to medication also respond to expectation, proving that perception is inseparable from prediction. Your brain isn't lying, it's managing resources, directing relief where it thinks it's needed. Pleasure too has layers of subtlety. The same dopamine system that reinforces reward also responds to anticipation. Much of pleasure lies not in receiving the reward, but in expecting it. This predictive pleasure keeps behavior flexible. It drives curiosity, creativity, and perseverance. Too much predictability, and the system grows dull. Too much uncertainty, and it slips into frustration. The sweet spot between the two is where motivation thrives. Interestingly, pain and pleasure share overlapping circuits. These same brain regions that light up with reward can activate during relief from pain. That sigh after a headache fades, or the bliss of cooling a sunburned hand. Those are small celebrations coded into your biology. Relief is its own form of pleasure, teaching the brain that endurance has value. It's an elegant reminder that comfort means little without contrast. Even long after an injury heals, the brain sometimes keeps the signal alive. Chronic pain can persist not because the body is still in danger, but because the nervous system has learned the pattern too well. Neurons that fire together wire together. The same rule that builds habits can also sustain suffering. Yet neuroplasticity cuts both ways. Through training, therapy, or mindfulness, the brain can relearn its boundaries, quieting overactive pain networks. The cones on the road can be rearranged. Emotion, attention, and memory all feed into this loop. Pain demands focus. It narrows awareness to the present moment, while pleasure expands it, encouraging engagement with the world. The balance between the two defines much of behaviour. A creature entirely without pain would take reckless risks. One without pleasure would lack purpose. The human brain thrives because it integrates both signals, turning experience into wisdom. You can see this balance even in small daily choices. The comfort of staying in bed competes with the satisfaction of achievement. The brief sting of effort contrasts with the long-term glow of reward. The control system behind these conflicts is ancient, but remarkably sophisticated. It doesn't dictate, it negotiates. Every decision you make is a quiet conversation between the avoidance of pain and the pursuit of pleasure. When pain and pleasure are in harmony, behaviour feels fluid and purposeful. You pull your hand back from danger, but you still reach toward what you love. The system guides you through life like illuminated cones on a dark road, not barriers, but markers, ensuring you stay on course. Pain cautions, pleasure encourages. Together they form the most elegant navigation system evolution ever designed. So the next time you wince, or smile, or chase a goal that makes both happen at once, remember the dialogue taking place within. The brain isn't punishing or rewarding you arbitrarily. It's shaping your path, refining the delicate art of survival and satisfaction. Every ache, every thrill, every surge of comfort or relief, it's all part of the same conversation. A conversation that, in its own quiet way, keeps you safely and meaningfully alive. You're lying in bed, eyes closed, the day's noise still echoing faintly inside your head. Thoughts flicker and fade. Unfinished sentences, stray memories, half-formed plans. Then, somewhere between awareness and oblivion, your body gives a sudden twitch, a hypnic jerk, that tiny jolt as if you've tripped while falling asleep. It's the brain's last rehearsal before surrender, a signal that the conscious control center is powering down for the night. Sleep is about to take command. Despite how passive it feels, sleep is one of the brain's most active and carefully orchestrated states. It's not simply off. It's a nightly maintenance cycle, a sequence of biological programs that clean, reset, and optimize the entire control system. While you drift in dreams, the brain files memories, balances chemistry, and flushes out the debris left by a day of hard thinking. In a very real sense, the brain updates overnight. Please don't unplug. Sleep unfolds in distinct stages, each with its own purpose and rhythm. The first phase, light sleep, is the gentle descent. Brainwaves slow, muscles relax, and sensory gates begin to close. The world dims but doesn't disappear. Then comes deep sleep, the heavy restorative phase where the body repairs itself, tissues regenerate, and growth hormones flow freely. Finally, you rise into REM sleep, rapid eye movement, where the mind lights up again, dreams unfold, and the boundaries between imagination and memory blur. These stages cycle several times each night, like tides of consciousness ebbing and returning. Early in the night, deep sleep dominates. Later, REM takes the stage. The brain alternates between construction and reflection, first rebuilding the house, then wandering its halls. By morning, both body and mind emerge recalibrated. One of sleep's least known but most remarkable functions is cleaning. During wakefulness, the brain burns enormous amounts of energy, leaving behind metabolic waste, microscopic clutter that accumulates between cells. While you sleep, a specialized network called the glymphatic system flushes this debris away. Cerebrospinal fluid flows more freely, washing through the brain's tissues and carrying waste products, including proteins linked to aging and cognitive decline, out of circulation. It's like an overnight cleaning crew slipping in once the office is empty, tidying up for tomorrow's workload. Meanwhile, deep within the synapses, those delicate junctions where neurons meet, another form of maintenance is underway. Throughout the day, synapses strengthen as you learn and experience new things. But the brain can't keep every connection at full power. It would quickly become overloaded. During sleep, it performs synaptic homeostasis, trimming and recalibrating connections to restore balance. The important links are reinforced. The trivial ones are quietly weakened. It's a kind of neurological pruning, ensuring the garden of thought doesn't grow into chaos. This nightly adjustment explains why a good night's sleep sharpens focus and problem solving. Memory consolidation, the process of turning short-term experiences into long-term knowledge, relies heavily on it. The hippocampus, your brain's temporary notepad, replays patterns from the day, gradually transferring them to the cortex for permanent storage. It's as if the brain is saving its work to the hard drive before shutting down. Students pulling all-nighters often discover this the hard way. Learning without sleep is like writing notes on water. Dreams, those flickering narratives that play behind closed eyes, remain the most mysterious aspect of sleep's control system. During REM sleep, the brain becomes highly active, almost as much as when awake. But the body is paralyzed, preventing you from acting out your dreams. The content of those dreams can be bizarre, profound, or trivial, yet they serve a real function. They help integrate emotional memories, simulate scenarios, and link distant ideas. Some scientists call dreams the brain's offline mode, where creativity roams without supervision. It's rehearsal, therapy, and exploration all rolled into one. Even the transitions between wakefulness and sleep are fascinating feats of regulation. The hypothalamus and brainstem coordinate dozens of chemical switches to balance arousal and rest. Neurotransmitters like GABA, adenosine, and melatonin gently reduce activity in the wake-promoting circuits, while others such as histamine and norepinephrine fade into quiet. The circadian rhythm, governed by a cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, keeps the schedule precise, aligning internal time with the cycle of light and dark. When this rhythm drifts out of sync, as in jet lag or shift work, the control system protests, alertness dulls, memory falters, and mood frays. Hormones also follow this nightly choreography. Cortisol, which fuels daytime alertness, dips during sleep, while growth hormone and melatonin rise. These shifts don't just regulate mood and metabolism, they also set the tempo for immune function, digestion, and cell repair. Sleep is not rest from control, it is control in its purest, most restorative form. Even the small quirks of drifting off, the dreamlike flashes, the sudden sense of falling, are signs of the brain gradually switching networks. Conscious thought gives way to automatic maintenance. Systems that regulate temperature, breathing, and heart rate take priority, while the analytical mind recedes. The world outside softens, replaced by the gentle hum of internal housekeeping. Attention plays its part too. The prefrontal cortex, that great planner and critic, takes a well-deserved break during REM sleep. Without it, dreams unfold freely, unbound by logic or self-doubt. It's why creativity often sparks in sleep. The barriers that normally filter thought are temporarily lowered, allowing new combinations to form. Artists and inventors throughout history have credited dreams with sudden insights. The brain may wander aimlessly, but its wanderings are often wise. When morning comes, waking isn't an instant process, but a gradual return to external control. The thalamus reopens its gates to sensory input. The cortex resynchronizes with the world. A brief haze of confusion, sometimes called sleep inertia, lingers as the brain transitions from its internal rhythm to the demands of daylight. Within minutes, though, the systems that govern attention and movement re-engage, and the cycle begins again. The lesson from all this is simple but profound. Sleep is not optional maintenance. It is fundamental to the brain's ability to control anything at all. Without it, attention wavers, memory erodes, and even emotional regulation falters. The very circuits that make decisions and store meaning depend on those quiet hours of restoration. If you want your control systems to run smoothly, consistency matters more than perfection. Regular sleep and waking times help align circadian rhythms, allowing hormones, temperature, and neural repair to flow in sync. The brain, like any complex machine, thrives on predictability. Drift too far from that pattern, and even the most brilliant circuitry begins to flicker. Each night, when you close your eyes, your brain takes command in silence, flushing, filing, and fine-tuning itself for another day. You drift off as one version of yourself and wake as another, cleaner, sharper, slightly different. Beneath the calm surface of sleep, 1,000 unseen repairs unfold, keeping the orchestra of the mind in perfect tune. It's a comforting thought that while you rest, the conductor keeps working, making sure the symphony can begin again with the dawn. A sudden noise, a door slams, a car backfires, or a cup crashes to the floor, and in less than a heartbeat your whole body reacts. Muscles tense, heart rate quickens, breath shortens, pupils widen. For a moment, every cell in your body stands at attention. Then, just as quickly the alarm fades, your pulse slows, and a calm awareness returns. That entire arc, from jolt to recovery, is your stress response in action, a masterpiece of precision control built to protect and restore. At the center of this process lies a network known as the HPA axis, short for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's a partnership between brain and body, linking the hypothalamus deep in the brain to the pituitary gland and the adrenal glands perched atop your kidneys. Together they form the communication line between perception and physiology. The brain senses a threat. The body prepares to act. It begins with the hypothalamus, the brain's master coordinator. When it detects danger, real or imagined, it releases a chemical messenger called CRH, corticotropin-releasing hormone. This travels a short distance to the pituitary gland, which then dispatches ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, into the bloodstream. ACTH races to the adrenal glands, signaling them to release cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol acts like a global command. It redirects energy from long-term projects such as digestion or growth toward immediate survival tasks. Blood sugar rises, providing fuel for muscles and the brain. Immune responses adjust, inflammation is temporarily suppressed, and attention sharpens. The system is elegant and temporary, a brief, focused burst designed to handle moments of challenge. Once the threat passes, cortisol levels gradually fall and the body returns to baseline. This cascade is ancient and efficient. It evolved to save lives on the savannah, to help our ancestors run from predators, survive hunger, or endure sudden storms. For short bursts, it's remarkably beneficial. Stress in small contained doses strengthens the system, teaching the brain how to respond effectively next time. It's like a fire drill for the body, a temporary disruption that ensures preparedness. The trouble arises when the alarm doesn't stop. Modern life is full of slow-burning stressors, deadlines, uncertainty, constant stimulation that keep the HPA axis humming longer than it should. Cortisol, which is meant to spike and fall, stays elevated, subtly reshaping metabolism, sleep patterns, and even mood. It's as though the body keeps preparing for battle while the battlefield never appears. The storm comes but never clears. This distinction lies at the heart of two key ideas in biology: homeostasis and allostasis. Homeostasis refers to stability through constancy. maintaining a steady internal balance, like body temperature or blood pH. Allostasis, by contrast, means stability through change. It's the process by which the body actively adjusts its set points to meet new demands. Stress, when short and controlled, is a tool of allostasis, a temporary deviation from balance that ultimately reinforces resilience. Chronic stress, however, turns allostasis into overload, pushing the system beyond its adaptive range. Think of it like tuning an instrument. A little tension on the strings produces harmony. Too much, and they snap. The HPA axis constantly tunes the body to match circumstance, but it depends on moments of release to retune itself. Without recovery, the harmony turns to noise. Timing plays a crucial role in this rhythm. Cortisol naturally follows a daily cycle, peaking in the early morning to help you wake and energize, then declining gently through the day before reaching its lowest point at night. This ebb and flow keeps the body alert during daylight and restful after dark. When chronic stress flattens that rhythm, keeping cortisol high when it should be low, fatigue sets in, sleep falters, and concentration slips. The problem isn't cortisol itself, it's losing the rhythm that gives it purpose. Still, the system is not fragile. The HPA axis includes built-in feedback loops to keep it from running wild. As cortisol rises, it signals back to the hypothalamus and pituitary to slow production. It's a biological enough thank you that prevents overreaction. This self-regulation is what allows you to calm down after a scare, your body trusting that the emergency has ended. Even the feeling of recovery, that sigh, that slow exhale, is part of the design. It's the parasympathetic nervous system stepping in to guide the return to baseline. Heart rate slows, digestion resumes, muscles unclench. It's the body's way of saying, the danger is over. Let's rebuild. Without this phase, stress would never end, and survival would come at the cost of long-term stability. Interestingly, perception alone can trigger the full stress response. The brain reacts to imagined threats almost as strongly as to real ones. A worrying thought, a remembered failure, or even the tone of a message can activate the same circuits as a physical danger. In the modern world, the predator is often psychological, but the body still prepares to run. This mismatch between ancient wiring and modern context is one reason chronic stress is so pervasive. The alarms were designed for tigers, not traffic jams. Yet stress isn't the villain it's often made out to be. A brief surge of cortisol before a challenge sharpens the mind and steadies the body. Athletes, performers, and students alike benefit from that edge, the slight rise in alertness that signals readiness. In the right dose, stress is not damage, it's adaptation in motion. The key is not to eliminate stress, but to complete its cycle: activation, action, and recovery. What matters most is the return to calm. Recovery isn't weakness, it's how the system resets. Every storm that passes leaves the fields greener. Every pulse of cortisol that fades teaches the brain that it can endure. The HPA axis, when functioning properly, is a master of balance. Fierce when needed, gentle when allowed. There are simple ways to help it stay in tune. Regular sleep keeps the daily cortisol rhythm intact. Physical activity gives the stress response a physical outlet, burning through excess tension. Deep breathing, slow exhalations, and mindfulness all engage the parasympathetic system, inviting the return to baseline. Even laughter and social connection can lower cortisol, reminding the brain that safety and community go hand in hand. Stress in the grand design was never meant to be constant thunder. It was meant to be weather, powerful, cleansing, and transient. When the storm rolls through and passes, the soil it leaves behind is richer, the air clearer. The body too thrives on that rhythm: challenge, resolution, calm. When your heart next jumps at a sudden noise or your breath quickens before a daunting task, remember that your body is performing an ancient ritual. a flash of lightning followed by gentle rain. It's not broken, it's built for survival, and if you allow the calm to follow, the storm will have done its work, watering the fields, strengthening the roots, and reminding you that recovery, not resistance, is the truest measure of control. Stand up straight for a moment, or try to. Even as you think you're holding perfectly still, your body is in constant motion. Tiny muscles in your ankles and back are firing in rapid bursts, making hundreds of micro-corrections to keep you balanced. Your center of gravity drifts forward and back by fractions of a millimeter. You sway so slightly you don't notice, but your nervous system does. This invisible dance is the essence of control, a process not of stillness but of continual adjustment. At every level, from single cells to the whole body, the brain runs on a principle called negative feedback. It's a beautifully simple idea. Detect error, correct it, and repeat. The system doesn't aim for perfection. It aims for stability. Every biological function, temperature, blood sugar, oxygen, even mood, depends on this quiet balancing act. The moment something drifts away from its ideal range, the brain and body work together to bring it gently back. Take temperature, for example. Humans operate best around 37 degrees Celsius. If you overheat, sensors in the hypothalamus detect the change and trigger cooling responses. Blood vessels widen, sweat glands activate, and behavior shifts. You seek shade, drink water, slow down. If you get too cold, the opposite happens. Vessels constrict, muscles shiver to generate heat, and your brain urges you toward warmth. It's an endless back and forth, a conversation between body and environment that never stops. You are not a fixed object, but a living negotiation. The same logic governs carbon dioxide levels in your blood. Tiny chemoreceptors in the brainstem constantly monitor it, adjusting your breathing rate every few seconds. If CO2 rises, you breathe faster to blow it off. If it falls, breathing slows. This automatic rhythm happens whether you're asleep or awake, scaling effortlessly to match the needs of a sprint, a nap, or a sigh. You could say that your respiratory system is an experienced diplomat, always striving for compromise between demand and supply. Then there's glucose, the brain's favourite fuel. After a meal, blood sugar climbs. The pancreas releases insulin, ushering glucose into cells for use or storage. When levels drop, another hormone, glucagon, calls for reserves to be released back into circulation. This duet keeps your energy stable hour by hour. It's not flawless. Sugar can still swing high or low, but the fact that it works at all, under the chaos of daily life, is a quiet triumph of control. Everywhere you look inside the body, you find the same principle at work. Error detection followed by measured correction. Even posture, that simple act of standing, relies on thousands of sensors in muscles and joints feeding continuous feedback to the spinal cord and brain. The system detects the tiniest wobble and counters it before you fall. It's so efficient that you only notice it when it fails, when you trip, slip, or wake up on an airplane with your head sliding sideways. These loops of feedback are what scientists call homeostatic control systems. Each one has three parts: a sensor that detects change, a control center that compares it to a target, and an effector that makes the correction. It's the same basic structure whether it's regulating body temperature or hormone release. Even the brain's chemical balance, serotonin, dopamine, cortisol, depends on feedback loops that prevent the system from spinning out of control. But here's the twist. The body's goal isn't perfect accuracy, it's robustness. Being slightly off target is fine as long as you're close enough to function. Good enough beats perfect every time, because perfection is fragile. Systems that tolerate small fluctuations can bend without breaking, adapt without collapsing. Your brain is pro-balance. not pro-perfection. It doesn't chase absolute zero or exact alignment. It settles comfortably within the zone of survival. Engineers sometimes borrow this concept from biology. Air conditioners, autopilots, and thermostats all use negative feedback to maintain set points. Yet even these human designs rely on tolerance. A few degrees of wiggle room, a small acceptable error. If your home thermostat demanded perfect precision, your heater would click on and off dozens of times a minute. The same goes for your body. A little imperfection keeps everything running smoothly. This tolerance is supported by redundancy, the biological equivalent of backup systems. If one pathway fails, another can often compensate. Lose part of the visual cortex, and nearby areas can sometimes reorganize to restore function. Damage to the inner ear can be offset by the eyes and proprioception. Even your balance system has duplicates. The vestibular apparatus in each ear serves as a spare for the other. The brain builds with backups because it knows the world is unpredictable. Homeostasis isn't static either. The set points your body aims for change depending on circumstance. During exercise, your heart rate and temperature rise to meet demand. During sleep, they drop to conserve energy. This adaptability is what scientists call dynamic equilibrium, stability achieved through motion. The target shifts, but the system remains stable around it, like a surfer staying upright on a moving wave. Feedback also explains why control sometimes feels imperfect from the inside. The delay between sensing an error and correcting it can cause small oscillations. You can feel it when trying to hold a laser pointer steady. Your hand overshoots, then compensates in the other direction, creating a tiny jitter. The body's feedback systems do the same thing at micro levels all day long. You're never perfectly still because life itself is a moving average. Even emotions follow this rule. Stress, excitement, and calm are regulated by feedback loops that keep you from drifting too far into either panic or apathy. The HPA axis, for instance, uses cortisol to stimulate and then restrain its own response. When stress hormones rise, they eventually signal the brain to slow their release. Emotion, like posture, depends on constant fine-tuning, 1,000 minor adjustments to keep the inner climate livable. This philosophy of good enough control has profound advantages. It allows resilience. A body chasing perfection would shatter at the first disturbance. A body content with balance can absorb chaos and carry on. Every breath, heartbeat, and movement is a reminder that life is not about avoiding error, but about correcting it gracefully. The art lies not in preventing deviation, but in returning to center again and again. You can see this idea everywhere once you start looking. A tree sways to survive the wind. A thermostat tolerates fluctuation to avoid burnout. A human mind learns from mistakes rather than denying them. The secret of endurance isn't rigidity, it's flexibility woven with feedback. So the next time your hands tremble slightly or your thoughts wander before finding focus, remember, that's your control system doing what it was built to do, noticing drift, applying correction, and settling near enough to harmony. Perfection is a myth. Balance is a miracle. Your body knows the difference, and it's that quiet, forgiving tolerance, that humble, good enough, that keeps you alive, steady, and beautifully human. Control, for all its grace and complexity, sometimes stumbles. The brain's circuits, billions of neurons talking across trillions of connections, usually hum in near-perfect synchrony, each signal routed with astonishing precision. But when that delicate balance is disrupted, control can falter. Movements slow or twist, speech stutters, thoughts blur. It's a sobering reminder that even the most remarkable machine can lose its rhythm. And yet, what's equally remarkable is how often it finds its way back. One of the most common ways this balance breaks is through stroke, an interruption in the blood flow that nourishes the brain. Deprived of oxygen and glucose, neurons in the affected area can no longer fire properly. The result depends on where the damage occurs. A stroke in the motor cortex might leave one side of the body weak. A stroke in the language regions might mute speech while sparing understanding. It's as if a few lines of the brain's vast wiring diagram have been suddenly erased. But here's where the story turns from tragedy to tenacity. The brain, unlike most machines, can reorganize itself. When a pathway is blocked, neighboring neurons often take on new roles, forming alternate routes around the damage. This capacity, known as neuroplasticity, allows the brain to relearn lost skills, one tiny adjustment at a time. Rehabilitation therapy harnesses this adaptability through repetition and feedback. Each movement, each effortful word tells surviving neurons, strengthen this route, reinforce this pattern. Over weeks or months, new networks bloom where old ones faded. The process may be slow, but it is deeply hopeful. Even after significant injury, entire regions can shift their functions. Visual areas can learn to process touch. Auditory regions can adapt to aid balance or speech. The brain is less a static map and more a living city. When one bridge collapses, traffic reroutes. Side streets expand, detours form. With guidance and time, control returns. Perhaps not exactly as before, but often close enough to carry on. Another moment when control can slip is during seizures, which arise from bursts of excessive synchrony across neural networks. In a healthy brain, neurons fire in patterns, some leading, some following, like instruments in an orchestra. During a seizure, that harmony collapses into uniform rhythm. The neurons, instead of communicating, all shout at once. Depending on where this happens, the result may be a brief flicker in awareness, a convulsion, or a temporary loss of control. Yet even here, the system is not broken. It's misfiring. Most seizures end naturally within minutes as inhibitory circuits reassert control and calm returns. For many people, medication or careful management of triggers can stabilize the rhythm entirely. Scientists studying epilepsy often describe it not as chaos, but as too much order, an excess of synchronization where variety should be. The goal of treatment, then, is to restore that healthy diversity of signals, the quiet interplay of inhibition and excitation that makes thought and movement flow smoothly again. Other disorders of control arise not from damage or synchrony, but from gating problems, disruptions in how signals are selected and filtered. In conditions such as Parkinson's disease, the basal ganglia, which normally decide which actions to start and which to suppress, lose access to a key chemical messenger, dopamine. Without that signal, movements become hesitant, slow, or rigid, as if the brain is stuck between go and stop. Even so, the system still listens. Deep brain stimulation, a therapy that delivers precise electrical pulses to specific regions, can restore fluidity by rebalancing these circuits. It's like nudging a stuck gear back into motion. Combined with medication and practice, such interventions help the brain regain its internal rhythm, proving once again that even impaired control can be recalibrated. Beyond these well-known examples lies a broader lesson about resilience. The brain is not a fragile glass instrument, but a flexible, self-correcting network. Damage, disorder, and imbalance may silence certain voices within it, but the overall conversation continues. Neurons sprout new connections, circuits recruit allies, unused regions awaken to take on unfamiliar roles. It's a story less about loss and more about adaptation. In rehabilitation, this adaptability becomes visible. After a stroke, a patient might first struggle to lift a spoon. Day after day, the effort continues, small, shaky motions that seem to achieve little. But beneath the surface, neurons are rewiring, strengthening synapses, recruiting new support. One day, the spoon steadies, A week later, the hand writes a word. Each repetition is a vote of confidence in the brain's ability to repair itself, one spark at a time. Even in the face of chronic conditions, adaptation persists. The brain learns to predict and compensate for its own gaps. Someone with tremor might unconsciously adjust how they hold a cup. Someone with partial paralysis might recruit mirror neurons to visualize movement, stimulating plasticity even without motion. The nervous system is an improviser, always searching for alternate rhythms when the main melody falters, and though not every circuit can be restored, many can be rerouted. Rehabilitation isn't about returning to the old pattern, it's about discovering new ones that work. This perspective reshapes how we think about control. It's not the maintenance of perfection, but the capacity to recover from imperfection. The strength of the system lies not in its precision, but in its forgiveness. Research continues to uncover just how dynamic this recovery can be. Techniques like transcranial magnetic stimulation and neurofeedback training use the brain's own signals to encourage healing. Virtual reality therapy allows patients to practice motion and coordination in immersive, motivating ways. Even music and rhythm, engaging wide networks at once, have shown promise in retraining motor and speech functions. The modern understanding of the brain no longer ends at damage, it begins with recovery. The story of faltering control is, ultimately, a story of resilience. The brain can misfire, stumble and stall, yet it keeps searching for new balance. Whether through plasticity, compensation or sheer persistence, it adapts. It listens to error, learns from failure, and finds roots around the obstacles within itself. Every recovery, whether from stroke, seizure, or movement disorder, reminds us that control isn't a fixed state, it's a living dialogue. The system bends, reroutes, heals, and learns. Even when its harmony is briefly broken, the orchestra of the brain never stops trying to play. The music may change, but the performance goes on. You've probably noticed it without thinking. Walking beside someone, and before long, your footsteps fall into rhythm. Neither of you plans it. There's no conscious counting or command. Yet within moments, two independent nervous systems have aligned their tempo, stride for stride. The same thing happens when laughter ripples through a crowd, when clapping turns from chaos to rhythm, or when a whisper in a quiet library automatically lowers the voices of everyone nearby. The brain, though built for individual control, is also wired for collective synchronization. This quiet social coordination is one of the most fascinating aspects of human control. Beneath words, gestures, and glances, our brains are constantly predicting each other's timing, aligning speech, motion, and emotion with remarkable precision. It's not something we're taught, it's something we inherit. From the first months of life, infants rock in response to the rhythm of speech, long before understanding language. The seeds of cooperation are planted in tempo. When people move together, the synchrony isn't just external, it's neural. Brain scans show that during coordinated activities like dancing, drumming, or even conversation, patterns of brain activity across participants begin to mirror one another. It's a phenomenon called interpersonal entrainment, where two or more brains start to oscillate in step, sharing predictions about what will happen next. This isn't telepathy, it's timing. Each person's nervous system adjusts its internal rhythm to better anticipate the other's actions. The more accurately we predict, the more harmonious the interaction feels. Language is perhaps the most intricate example of this. Every conversation is a duet of control systems predicting each other's turns. As one person speaks, the listener's auditory and motor cortices light up, not just hearing the words, but silently simulating how they're formed. This mirror activity helps decode speech faster, preparing responses before the speaker even finishes. The result is the seamless flow of dialogue, overlapping nods, well-timed replies, shared laughter. The gaps between turns in conversation average only a few hundred milliseconds, faster than conscious thought. To achieve that, your brain must start predicting before it knows. This same predictive mechanism explains why humans are drawn to rhythm. When a song plays, neurons in the motor system begin to fire in sync with the beat, even if you're sitting perfectly still. The cerebellum and basal ganglia, those guardians of timing and movement, align their pulses to match external rhythms. This is why you tap your foot without meaning to, or feel compelled to move when music swells. The brain loves patterns it can forecast. Synchrony is its favourite language. Shared rhythm also carries emotional weight. When people sing, march, or dance together, their heart rates and breathing often synchronize. Hormones such as oxytocin, associated with trust and bonding, increase. Groups that move in time tend to cooperate more and feel more connected afterward. It's one reason humans have used rhythm in rituals, armies, and ceremonies for thousands of years. Collective movement doesn't just coordinate muscles, it knits minds. Consider applause at the end of a performance. It begins as a scattered burst of sound, random, individual, uncoordinated. But within seconds, a pattern emerges. The crowd begins to clap in rhythm, drawn together by the shared experience and the feedback of sound. No one leads, yet everyone follows. Then, as the synchronization grows too perfect, it dissolves again into noise, individuality reasserting itself. This ebb and flow between chaos and order is the hallmark of social control, not rigid conformity, but flexible alignment. On a smaller scale, these same dynamics govern how we move through shared spaces. In busy cities, people automatically adjust their walk-in pace and direction to avoid collisions, creating spontaneous streams of coordinated motion. No central authority issues commands, yet crowds flow like liquid. Each brain predicts the paths of others and corrects its own movements in milliseconds. The result is a choreography so smooth that it feels invisible, proof that even without words the nervous system knows how to cooperate. Our sensitivity to collective rhythm extends to emotion and behaviour. In a tense room, anxiety spreads like static. In a joyful crowd, laughter ripples effortlessly. This emotional synchrony happens through subtle cues, facial expressions, tone, posture, that the brain continuously tracks and mirrors. Mirror neurons in regions like the premotor cortex and insula help translate observed emotion into felt experience. When someone nearby yawns, your own brain's motor system briefly prepares to do the same. Empathy, in its simplest form, is a kind of resonance. These shared patterns of timing and mirroring help societies function. They underlie conversation, teaching, teamwork, and even traffic flow. But they also remind us that individuality is not isolation. Each brain is a node in a larger network of prediction and response. We are not separate agents moving through space. We're constantly adjusting to the rhythms around us. Spoken, musical, emotional, or social. Neuroscientists sometimes describe this phenomenon as predictive alignment. It means that when two people interact, their brains gradually converge on a shared model of what's happening. That's why you can finish someone's sentence, feel when to pause in a group conversation, or sense agreement without words. Your brain isn't just reacting, it's rehearsing the other person's thoughts in real time. Connection is, at its core, a joint act of controlled imagination. This collective synchrony scales beautifully. Think of a sports team operating at peak coordination, passes timed perfectly, plays unfolding with fluid precision. Each player doesn't need to consciously monitor every teammate. They rely on shared rhythm and prediction. The same happens in orchestras where dozens of musicians follow the same invisible pulse. Even in large-scale events like protests or festivals, collective emotion and movement seem to self-organize. The brain's wiring for prediction and imitation turns groups into temporary superorganisms capable of acting as one, and yet healthy synchronization always allows for variation. If everyone clapped in identical rhythm forever, the energy would fade. If conversation lacked pauses or laughter, it would sound robotic. What makes human coordination so remarkable is its balance between unity and independence. Brains align, but they never fully merge. Like dancers improvising within shared music, we stay connected without losing ourselves. You can see this delicate harmony in the most ordinary moments. A family sharing a meal unconsciously syncs chewing and gestures. Strangers chatting on a train start mirroring each other's tone. Even silence between close friends often settles into rhythm, breaths matching, stillness shared. These are the micro patterns of connection, the quiet choreography of social control. Nature, of course, discovered this long before we did. Fireflies flashing in unison across a summer marsh, schools of fish gliding in perfect formation, flocks of starlings twisting as one. All are expressions of synchronization as survival. Each individual follows simple rules: sense, adjust, align. Together, those rules create order from multiplicity, rhythm from randomness. Human brains simply added language and emotion to the same ancient pattern. In the end, social synchronization reminds us that the brain's purpose isn't just to control the body. It's to coordinate with other bodies, to predict, adapt, and resonate. Control at its highest form isn't domination but connection, a dance of minds that listen as much as they lead. Like fireflies pulsing together over dark water, we flicker into rhythm, fall out again, and find our way back. No command is needed, just attention, timing, and the timeless urge to move. Not alone, but in step with the world around us. You decide to pick up a glass of water. At least that's how it feels. A simple, conscious choice followed by smooth, deliberate motion. But if you could look inside your brain, you'd discover something quietly surprising. The decision began before you were aware of it. A fraction of a second before you chose, neural activity had already started preparing your muscles to move. Your sense of decision arrived late to its own party. This curious timing was first uncovered in the late 1970s, when neuroscientist Benjamin Libet asked volunteers to flex their wrists at a moment of their choosing while watching a rotating clock. Electrodes recorded that their brains began ramping up activity several hundred milliseconds before participants reported feeling the intention to move. The implication was unsettling. Maybe the brain starts actions automatically, and consciousness merely narrates them after the fact. At first glance, that sounds like the end of free will, a dethroning of the conscious self. But that conclusion misses something important. What Libet's work and the decades of research that followed really revealed was not the absence of will, but the complexity of control. The brain is layered in time. Fast automatic processes prepare and initiate behavior. Slower, reflective systems observe, adjust, and learn from it. Consciousness might not push every button, but it still writes the manual. Think of the brain as running on two intertwined schedules. The subconscious systems, habit networks, reflexes, predictive circuits, operate in milliseconds. They're the autopilot, built for efficiency. They take care of walking, talking, driving, and typing without constant supervision. Then there's the conscious system, which works on a slower timescale, overseeing long-term goals, ethics, and self-reflection. It doesn't need to decide when to blink or how to balance, but it does decide what kind of person you want to be and what direction your life should move. Everyday experience confirms this partnership. When you reach for a doorknob, you don't calculate the trajectory. Your brain handles the physics automatically. But you chose to leave the room. When you speak, words often flow before you've consciously assembled the sentence. Yet you guided the topic, tone, and intention. It's as if consciousness steers a powerful self-driving system, adjusting course, not spinning every gear. This layered control evolved for good reason. Conscious thought is slow and resource-intensive. If the brain required full awareness for every decision, you'd still be standing in the kitchen debating whether to swallow. By delegating the details to unconscious processes, the system saves energy and speed. The mind's job is not to manage every neuron, but to shape the overall rules those neurons follow. That's where agency truly lives, not in micromanagement, but in guidance. Consciousness can't start every action, but it can veto, reshape, or reframe them. Libet himself noted this in his later work. Even if the readiness signal appears first, awareness can still intervene before the action is completed. You might begin to reach for a second slice of cake, then stop mid-motion. The brain's autopilot proposes, consciousness disposes. This interplay is evident in learning. When you practice a new skill, say playing piano or riding a bike, every motion begins under deliberate control. You focus intensely on each finger, each turn. Over time, the conscious steps fade as the basal ganglia and cerebellum take over. The skill becomes automatic. Conscious effort is not replaced, it's absorbed. The autopilot learns from experience, and the pilot moves on to higher level goals. A similar dialogue shapes moral and social behavior. Your instinctive reactions, anger, fear, empathy, may arise before you recognize them. But your reflective mind evaluates their consequences and adjusts how you respond next time. In that sense, awareness is the teacher of the unconscious. It builds the habits, scripts, and moral heuristics that later run automatically. The self is not the momentary chooser, it's the long-term designer. What we call will is really a conversation between systems. The emotional brain generates impulses. The reflective brain weighs them. The motor circuits carry out the result. Sometimes the dialogue is smooth, sometimes tense, but it's always ongoing. Even in decision, that familiar tug of war between what you want and what you think you should do is proof that both voices are active. Interestingly, neuroscience shows that conscious intention doesn't vanish during automatic acts. It simply shifts its focus. During well-learned behaviors, the prefrontal cortex quiets down, but other areas linked to monitoring and correction stay alert. It's the same difference between driving a familiar route and navigating a storm. Awareness scales to match demand. When novelty or conflict appears, consciousness takes the wheel again. This dynamic view of control helps dissolve the old debate between free will and determinism. The brain is neither fully free nor fully mechanical. It's adaptive. It generates possibilities, filters them through experience, and integrates feedback from both internal states and the outside world. You might not choose every thought that enters your mind, but you can decide which ones to cultivate. You can't stop the first impulse, but you can shape the second. Modern experiments have refined this understanding. We now know that the readiness potential that early neural signal Libet found doesn't always lead to movement. It represents preparation, not inevitability. The brain runs mini simulations of possible actions before committing. Conscious awareness, arriving slightly later, can endorse or cancel those drafts. It's less a puppet show than a sophisticated review process. And while moment-to-moment control may emerge from below awareness, the overall framework of your life, your goals, principles, habits, arises from conscious reflection. You decide to practice kindness, to exercise, to learn a language, to be patient. Those decisions sculpt your automatic patterns. The brain that once reacted blindly to impulse learns to pause, to filter, to align with your chosen identity. In that way, will isn't an illusion, it's a form of authorship spread across time. Even the subjective feeling of I chose that has an adaptive purpose. It binds cause to consequence, teaching the brain which actions belong to the self. Without that sense of ownership, learning would collapse. The illusion, if it is one, is functional. It allows experience to shape future behaviour, ensuring the system remains coherent and accountable. There's a certain humility in realising that so much of what we do arises automatically. The body breathes, balances, blinks and corrects without permission. The hands type, the mouth forms words, the heart adjusts its rhythm. Consciousness rides atop a vast sea of unseen processes, yet it can still nudge the tide. The point isn't to dominate the machinery, but to harmonise with it. Agency then feels less like commanding a machine and more like steering an intelligent autopilot. You set the destination, monitor the instruments, and make corrections when the route drifts. The brain handles the rest with quiet brilliance. That's not a loss of freedom, it's the definition of mastery. Freedom is knowing when to intervene and when to let the system run. And so, as the day winds down, you find yourself once again lifting that glass of water, unaware of the milliseconds of preparation that made it possible. Muscles coordinate, neurons pulse, and the motion feels effortless. The illusion of control, if it is one, is a beautiful one, because it keeps you engaged with the story of your own mind. The hands rest lightly on the wheel, the road stretches ahead, smooth and silent. Beneath the hum of thought, the great machine of the brain carries on, self-correcting, self-guiding, always learning where to go next. There's a certain elegance in realizing that control, the force that keeps you upright, thinking, breathing and feeling, is not loud or dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It hums quietly beneath every heartbeat, adjusts behind every breath, and fine-tunes every motion you make without asking for thanks. From reflexes to reasoning, from the pulse in your wrist to the choices that steer your life, the brain holds an orchestra together. Electrical whispers, chemical moods, predictive guesses, and constant corrections, all so you can simply be. The more you understand it, the more miraculous its humility becomes. The brain is not a tyrant barking orders, it's a patient conductor, coaxing harmony from chaos. Signals flash down nerves like notes on a staff, each timed to the millisecond, each blending into the next. Muscles contract and relax in perfect sequence. Hormones drift through the bloodstream, adjusting energy, appetite, warmth, and calm. Even the neurons themselves, tiny branching filaments of living electricity, fire in unison, as if keeping time to an invisible rhythm that began long before you were born. Every moment of balance is a small triumph. The body is perpetually off-center, the heart constantly recalibrating its beat, the lungs adjusting their depth with every sigh. You don't notice because you don't need to. The brilliance of the system lies in how completely it hides its labour. You could call it humility, or perhaps perfection of another kind. Mastery so seamless it disappears. The best operators leave no fingerprints. Your brain signs with silence. When you think of control, it's easy to imagine tension, the effort of holding things still, but true control, the kind your nervous system practices every second, is a living balance between letting go and holding steady. It allows drift, then gently calls you back. The pupils widen to let in more light, then contract. Blood pressure dips, then rises. Your body sways on its feet like a tree responding to the wind. Nothing rigid, nothing frozen, just endless subtle negotiation. And through it all, the brain listens. It listens to signals from within and without, weighing them, comparing them, predicting what's likely to come next. It doesn't need certainty, only enough probability to act gracefully. That's why life feels smooth, even though every heartbeat and breath is an improvisation. Perception itself is a prediction. constantly updated by feedback. You are, in a sense, both the puppet and the puppeteer, the controlled and the controller, seamlessly intertwined. Consider what this means when you lie down at night. The conscious mind begins to fade, but the great regulator never sleeps. The heart keeps time, the lungs carry on, the brainstem maintains its silent vigil. Even in dreams, the brain is busy, sorting, cleaning, and mending the circuits that held you upright through the day. Control doesn't vanish with sleep, it simply shifts into a quieter key. It's easy to take that for granted. The breath arrives, unbidden. The eyes blink, the stomach turns food to fuel, the blood ferries oxygen to every cell. You're a symphony of automatic grace, a self-running universe whose conductor never tires. To pause for a moment and recognize that is to feel a kind of reverence, not for some external order, but for the quiet genius inside you. There's humor in it too. Imagine if you had to consciously manage everything your brain currently does on your behalf. You'd never make it past breakfast. Don't forget to adjust the heart rate, maintain balance, secrete just enough insulin. Oh, and maybe blink occasionally. The human body would grind to a halt within minutes if awareness had to handle the logistics. The brain spares you that impossible task, juggling billions of variables while politely pretending you're in charge. And yet awareness still matters. The conscious self may not push every neuron into motion, but it gives the system purpose. It chooses the direction of travel, the meaning behind the movement. It learns, teaches, and dreams. It builds the stories that turn raw sensation into understanding. The body manages the present, the mind the future. Together, they make control not just mechanical, but meaningful. The harmony between those two, reflex and reflection, is where life feels most human. The effortless act of walking down a street while thinking of someone you love. The rhythm of your heart aligning with laughter. The way music stirs your pulse and breath, as if both belong to the same melody. Each is a small miracle of coordination, body and mind in fluent conversation, each trusting the other. Even when control falters, the resilience is astonishing. Circuits reroute, habits relearn, balance restored. The same adaptability that lets you stand on one foot also helps you rebuild after loss or illness. The brain is not fragile glass. It's a flexible web that bends with experience and strengthens through repair. It learns from every mistake, not out of pride, but from the quiet instinct to keep you whole. And when the day's activity ends, when movement slows, thoughts soften, and the hum of awareness fades, the symphony doesn't stop. You lie in the dark, the muscles slack, the mind gently drifting. Beneath it all, the body continues its work, the heart and lungs in their calm duet, the neurons whispering to one another, the rhythms of homeostasis unfolding with absolute confidence. The system has done this every night of your life, long before you understood it, and will go on doing so until your very last. That simple fact, that you can rest while the brain keeps watch, might be one of the most profound comforts in existence. You can let go precisely because something inside you never does. Control, paradoxically, allows rest. It's the reason peace feels possible. If you listen closely in those final moments before sleep, you can almost hear it. The faint pulse, the rhythm of breath, the slow drift towards stillness. The orchestra of the body, closing another movement. The conductor lowers the baton. The room fades into quiet. Your brain doesn't ask for thanks, but it deserves it. It has steered you through storms, learned your habits, balanced your chemistry, and rebuilt itself countless times, all while pretending you were the one in charge. It keeps the lights on, the gears turning, the rhythm steady, even as your thoughts wander elsewhere. Gratitude for that unseen labour is perhaps the gentlest form of awe. And so, as the world grows silent and the pulse of life softens, remember the invisible order beneath the calm. Control is not a cage, it's the grace that allows you to move freely within it. It is the reason chaos feels navigable, the reason stillness feels safe. The best operators leave no fingerprints. Your brain signs with silence. May your next breath remind you that even rest is beautifully controlled